When I went to Somalia, I went on my own. But that was our first indication that something was wrong. At the time, the pirates were in charge. We got into the car, headed for the hotel, and about halfway there was a battle wagon. We agreed on a price for security, but the guard team didn't show up for work that morning. And then they fired into the air. I'm like, oh, it's going to be horrible. I was captured alone. They pulled me out. They beat me on my scalp. They broke my wrist. A week after my kidnapping, Mohammed Garfanji, kind of a legendary pirate boss, said, you have to demand $20 million or we'll start to starve you in 24 hours. And I said, that's insane. And after that, the Somalis said, stop the phone calls. For a year and a half, I didn't hear from the outside world at all. That night, they took us to kind of a cave at the top of a valley when a ship appeared on the horizon. It was a hostage ship. The captain had been killed and his body was in the freezer.
How long are you on this boat for?
6 months.
Oh my God.
That was a feeling of death on the ship.
Did you try to escape again?
This is my chance.
There's some sharks in there.
There are sharks, and either I was going to die or, with any luck, get free.
So what happened? What's up, guys? Just a quick note about this episode. There is going to be about 35 to 40 minutes that you are not going to see from this. You'll hear about it when we get to that point. It has to do with a long tangent we went on that was awesome, but was unrelated to the title of the video. So I'm going to put that content on my Patreon. That link is in my description below. And if you do not want to join Patreon, fully understand that. It will probably also go out on my third channel, the 1 hour podcast channel called Julian Dorey Daily, which is also linked in my description below. We will probably put that out there in a month or two, so you can check it out there. In the meantime, if you have not subscribed, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. It is the #1 piece of help we can get to allow our videos to grow in the algorithm and continue to get great guests like this. So thank you to all of you who have already done that, and thank you to all of you who are going to do so now. Had a name like Michael Scott Moore, I would say the full name every single time.
Yeah, Michael Scott
Moore.
Moore.
Such a bar, right?
I do, yeah, Michael Scott Moore, yeah.
Have you just been saying that your whole life? You walk into a bar, Michael Scott Moore.
No, when I go through life, I call myself Mike.
Just Mike?
Just Mike, yeah.
Michael Scott Moore is like...
Well, I don't want people to get confused. Scott is just the middle name, you know?
Listen, it all flows together.
People say Michael Scott or whatever. No.
No. You need the more on the end now.
Yeah, but I've used all three names just because there's already a director named Michael Moore.
That's right, and there's a character named Michael Scott.
Michael Scott,
so you're bridging it.
And a singer named Mike Scott. I'm a big fan. Waterboys.
Oh yeah.
That's all. That's the Scottish side.
That's
of my
why you
family.
need all three. That's what we're saying.
That's right.
But thank you so much for being here from California.
Good to talk to you.
It's great to talk with you. We're just having a nice conversation outside. I love hearing about things that I should have heard about before and haven't. So my producer, Alessi, hit me up and he said, yo, you got to talk to this guy who's abducted by Somali pirates. Right. I was like, what? Like Captain Phillips? He's like, no.
Oh, yeah, worse than Captain Phillips.
No, this is worse and longer and the whole bit. And you were on Joe Rogan back in the day. I somehow missed that.
And Trevor Noah and NPR. I mean,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you got the story out some years ago, but this is the book.
This is the book.
Right here, by the way. Let me see this bad boy real quick. The Desert and the Sea. And I know you're actually finishing up another book right now.
I'm working on my fourth book now. Yeah.
That we'll talk about. But, you know, before we get to 977 days in the captivity of Somali pirates, where I picture someone saying he's the captain now every single day, you know, how'd you end up in Somalia in the first place? What was going on?
So I was working as a journalist in Berlin, and I worked for Spiegel Online in Berlin, which is the online component of Spiegel magazine. And for that English service, I was writing about a trial that was very famous in Europe at the time of 10 Somali pirates. This is in about 2011.
Oh, wow.
And it took the whole year. So I was going back and forth. The trial was in Hamburg. So I was going back and forth from Berlin to Hamburg every couple of weeks. And it was an interesting story. The trial itself was taking too long. But the story was 10 guys boarded a ship and they got essentially arrested by the Dutch Navy. And it was the first time any pirate had been in front of a German judge in 4 centuries.
Whoa.
So I don't think people realize how new Somali piracy was, right? It was this new old crime. And so that was really interesting to me. And I had been writing, news stories from my desk about what was going on. Even when Captain Phillips got held for 3 days, I wrote that from my desk, just from wire services. So I was aware of what was going on down there. But once I was covering this trial and seeing these 10 guys from Somalia in the courtroom all the time, I realized that there was a book in it on a story that an American audience wouldn't have known so well. So it was well known in Europe, historic trial in Europe. In America, not so much. Interesting story behind it. And so I did a little more research and realized that, first of all, through connections at the trial, I could find someone who could bring me to central Somalia, to a place where other journalists had been. I mean, I wasn't, I wasn't doing something that no one else had done. And not only that, but he knew he was from the same city that half of that team was from. So 5 of the 10 pirates were from Galkayo, which is the city in central Somalia where we eventually went.
Galkayo. Can we pull that up on a map just so people have some bearings, Steve? But you said a phrase back there where you were saying at this time, which, you're talking in the 2011, 2012 period, Somali piracy was like new and back or something like that? Like,
well, they were the first pirates on Earth. I mean, speaking very broadly, it was the first large-scale phenomenon of piracy in over 200 years.
Wow.
So the last time that there was a proper threat to shipping from pirates on a very large scale was from North Africa and the Strait of Gibraltar when America was a new nation. That's why we founded the Navy, because Europeans were used to just sort of paying a tithe to make a crossing here and there where they might encounter Moroccan pirates or something going in and out of the Mediterranean. The Americans were new and had to send ships over to Europe all the time. And they said, actually, we can't keep paying this shit. We're going to establish a proper Navy and go over there. And in 1805, that was the first mission. And by 1815, that's when the Marines sort of famously landed in Tripoli and took care of the bosses who were running it.
Took care of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it was a Marine invasion. It was the first time that we landed people on a foreign shore.
Wow, that was over piracy.
The Marines especially were established over piracy, but the Navy really, I mean, of course we had ships to fight the British Navy, but and there was just an anniversary that goes back before 1805 that they celebrated in Washington or something. But the proper foundation of the Navy was in 1805, and that was the reason.
So you were saying we saw a dying down of piracy around the world until the early 2000s when the Somali pirates popped
Exactly.
up.
I mean, of course, there are exceptions.
Sure.
There have been pirates through the straits near Hong Kong for a long time, but they weren't such a reliable threat to shipping that people would avoid the route. Pirates were almost as much of a threat to shipping as the Houthis just in these last few years. And in fact, they know each other. So Yemenis and Somalis are just across the water from each other. So because of the Houthis, there's been more Somali piracy in the last couple of years.
So there's a
revival again.
Yeah, there's some
Somali
sort
pirates.
of organized,
There's a relationship. The relationship is probably closer between the Houthis and Al-Shabab, which is the terrorist network in Somalia. But because there's human trafficking across the Gulf of Aden, across the water between Somalia and Yemen, they know each other.
Now, when you say the human trafficking going on there, I don't know a ton about
labor
this.
trafficking. So Somalis don't have jobs. That's why they became pirates. A lot of them feel like they could or need to go across the water to Yemen or to Saudi Arabia. There's no jobs in Yemen, but in Saudi Arabia.
And they get trafficked.
They absolutely get trafficked there. And they need skiffs. So who has the skiffs? So pirates are involved in human trafficking too. And I've written about that in the meantime.
Does that mean, this is just where my head goes when you say that, does that mean that when, they utilize these resources, the pirates and the skiffs, to be able to get there under the promise that they're going to have labor when they get there, but perhaps when they get there, they're forced into indentured servitude and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I don't think that the Somali bands, the Somali gangs that run this stuff have any way of guaranteeing a job or anything. It's not like that.
Right.
But they know how to cross cross the Gulf of Aden. They know where to land, which bits of the coast are friendly to them and that kind of thing.
Now, Captain Phillips, can we just pull that up, Deef? That was what, like 06, 07?
2009.
Okay. So Captain Phillips, like you said, was about 3 days. And that was when...
It was an intense 3 days. I don't want to belittle what he went through.
Yeah. No, I've had guys sitting in that seat right there who were involved in that mission to end that thing. I had one Navy SEAL here.
Oh yeah, those guys.
And then my friend Jim DiOrio also he was at the FBI. He was a former Special Forces guy, but he was the FBI at the time, and he was like coming up for some of the negotiation or whatever. But so it was 09, right, Deef? Yeah. That was like the first time that I bring that up, because that was like the first time where the Somali pirate thing got into the public ethosphere in America, where we were having that conversation. But the case that you were tracking, what that was afterwards? After Captain Phillips?
Was maybe a year later, probably a year and a half. It was at the end of 2010. It was a German vessel, so it probably didn't make headlines in the United States, but it was one of the first. It was one of the only fully successful arrests of a whole pirate team. Let's put it that way. It was a relatively new ship, something similar just happened. It was a relatively new ship, so they had a citadel. They had a lockbox where the crew could go. I think they had that on Captain Phillips' ship too, but he didn't make it in there. The whole crew got in there. The pirates couldn't find him for a while. That gave the navies, the EU Navy force that's down there, a lot of time to respond. And while the pirates were on board frantically looking for their hostages, the Dutch Navy rappelled down onto the ship and arrested everybody. They didn't kill anybody. There was a great deal of gunfire.
Wow.
But they arrested these 10 men from Somalia, and then they get to the courtroom and they say they're all fishermen.
Just ended up on the wrong boat. And where was the boat when they seized it? Where was it?
It was off the northeast coast of Somalia. So I think off Puntland. I can't remember exactly. I mean, the gang hunted to the northeast, where my gang hunted to the southeast.
Yeah. Did you know that there's an online cannabis company that ships federally legal THC right to your door, and that they found a way to combine THC with carefully selected functional ingredients to create gummies, baked goods, and flour for whatever type of buzz you'd want? The company I'm talking about is Mood.com and their incredible line of cannabis gummies. And you can get 20% off your first order today at Mood.com by using promo code Julian at checkout. Forget one-size-fits-all supplements that only get you high. Mood's functional gummies are optimized to kick in as little as 15 minutes and take you directly to the mood you're looking for. Mood has a bunch of different gummies, but I like the Mind Magic gummies the most. Right, Thief?
Oh, yeah.
Mind Magic gummies are for deep work and enhanced creativity, and they get you right in the zone to get some good done. And also, I've talked to you before about the Sexual Euphoria gummies. They're going to turn every touch into a full-body experience. Beyond gummies, Mood also has a selection of flour, pre-rolls, bakery treats, and beverages. Listen, you can find gummies that just get you high pretty much anywhere these days. But Mood's functional gummies combine premium, federally legal THC with targeted botanicals to help you get into the perfect mood, usually in as little as 15 minutes. Best of all, not only is every Mood product backed by a 100-day satisfaction guarantee, but as I mentioned before, our listeners are going to get 20% off their first order using code Julian at checkout. So head on over to Mood.com, that link is in my description below. Find the functional gummy that matches exactly what you're looking for, and let Mood help you discover your perfect mood. And once again, don't forget to use promo code Julian at checkout to save 20% off your first order. Mood.com, link in description below. Now, how to, this is where it gets like a little beyond my understanding of how this all works, but you have a big ship, you got crew on there. How many people were on that German ship at the time, approximately?
That crew was probably about 12. It tends to be between 12 and 17.
One.
Well, no, it was an enormous ship, but they only need, the big work is moving the cargo containers on and off, right? So to run it, you need, 12, 15 people?
Really?
Yeah.
So that's standard for a boat like that?
Yeah.
Wow, I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't have guessed that. So you got 12, 15 guys on there. That makes more sense. They could be overrun. But they
don't have weapons either.
They don't have any weapons.
So the thing that made a difference with Somali piracy is sometimes you hear people say it's the navies. Not really, because the navies take a while to respond. What really worked was getting private mercenary gang groups. So a little team of 3 or 4 people with proper weapons to be on the merchant ship while it makes that passage through the pirate zone.
They didn't
basically
have that, though.
That ship didn't. They normally getting shot at is enough to scare off a skiff. normally. And I've seen video evidence to the contrary. So that's what made the difference. That's what started to cut down attacks. But attacks were really a serious problem for a few years before shipping as an industry decided that was going to be a good idea. Because for merchant crews, they don't want to have anything to do with guns.
Right.
I was eventually held on board a fishing vessel off Somalia, and all those guys they had nothing to do with guns. They didn't want to see a gun. And they certainly didn't want to hear the guns when they got fired. So for a while there was this debate about whether to put a mercenary team on a merchant vessel was a good idea, whether that might lead to an arms race on the water, because the pirates can just go to an arms bazaar and get a heavier weapon, right, and put that in the skiff.
More guys too.
More guys, bazookas. But how do you fire a bazooka from a moving skiff? So eventually that didn't happen. You can imagine it. Yeah. Somebody might try, but the arms race didn't happen, and the mercenary teams, although they're expensive, that's what helped.
So yeah, that's what I was thinking too as well. It's also a big expense.
Yeah,
you hire like a bunch of trained dudes from a private company. This isn't a small government contract or something. These guys charge.
Yeah, right.
And now you're doing that on every merchant ship.
And you're paying more for insurance too to make that passage. But this is, just to make it clear to everybody, this is the northeastern corner of Africa, where ships have to round the corner and go down the Gulf of Aden into the Red Sea to go through the Gulf the Suez Strait and the Suez Canal. So that's a major shipping checkpoint. It might be the busiest one on Earth. The only one that's busier might be Panama. So imagine that Panama was suddenly off the map for shipping, unless you did something about pirates.
Yeah,
this has not been. This is what I'm saying. This had not been a problem for 200 years. So all of a sudden, and for me, it was an example of increasing chaos in the world. I mean, it was order breaking down in some way that was not quite definable. But all of a sudden we have to deal with pirates again? Come on.
Yeah, it's crazy. So they start, obviously, sometime in the early 2000s before Captain Phillips. I know you've gone back through the history of where this all comes from, and you just mentioned there was chaos and breakdown in society, and obviously people are having trouble getting jobs in Somalia, and whenever you have a bad economy, that's where crime increases and everything. But what did you mentioned Al-Shabab, what did the infrastructure look like of it? Was it literally you had some sort of mandate where Al-Shabab is hey, we can start fucking taking ships down? Or
Right, yeah, no, so first of all, pirates are not Al-Shabab.
They're contracted to them.
No,
right?
Not at all.
Nothing.
So Somalia is a mess. It barely has government. It's been essentially in a state of anarchy since 1991, when their strongman got toppled by the clans. The clans within Somalia, like the clans within Libya,
put this in, if you
got sick of it after a while and rose up against their strongman. And just like Gaddafi, got rid of him and faced chaos to this day. The clan regions are self-governing. There's lots of conflict about which region and which piece of land belongs to who and that kind of thing. So they fight. So that low-level state of civil war is what is the basic condition in Somalia since 1991, which means, and this is important, there's no navy. There's no proper federal government. They used to call, after Black Hawk Down, they used to call the guy who presented himself as the president or the prime minister in Mogadishu, the mayor of Mogadishu. So that's how broad his power was. So after a while in the 90s, foreign fishing vessels would come in to Somali waters and just help themselves because there was no navy to ward them off. And for a long time in the 90s, this was a problem. Somali fishermen were feeling, bullied out of their own waters. And what the clans had to do was send out men in little skiffs with weapons and say, look, you need a license to fish here. And the foreign fishing crews would be like, what do you mean a license? Well, this little piece of paper that we're about to sell you for $50,000. And so it was not the most legitimate transaction, but it was a fishing boat dead in the water for maybe 24 hours, and maybe $50,000 changed hands, and that was it. So when people say that the roots of Somali piracy were in fishing and illegal fishing, that's true. It's true to that extent. It's not true that every Somali pirate is a frustrated fisherman, because all that was going on in the 90s. And then at some point, those bands, they became more organized. They became proper organized criminal bands. And starting in 2005, they decided they can go further out and hit not just fishing vessels that were coming into Somali waters, but merchant vessels that were sliding past Somalia on their way to the Suez Canal.
Now, fast and forward to today for a second, how does this look on a day-to-day basis? Because you mentioned now there's a lot of these vessels will have private security, and it sounds like that decreased a lot of it, but it still exists, right? Like they still try to do it?
It still exists, and they've made 2 pretty good attempts in the last 2 weeks. So one ship had to ward them off, so they got approached, and the mercenary team fired in the water, and they went away.
In the water.
Another ship got boarded by pirates, but everybody went into the citadel, and eventually a Navy came and said they didn't shoot him and they didn't arrest him, but they probably made a lot of noise and said, "Get off the fucking ship."
So the Navy comes and they don't arrest them. They're like, just get off the fucking ship. Yeah. Scram.
That's what happened last week. Yeah.
Must be nice to be a pirate out there. You don't have to get arrested. All right. Here we go. EU and Indian navies take over ship used by Somali pirates to seize Malta flag tanker.
Is that the one?
Yeah, let's see. Somali piracy in the region cost the world's economy $6 billion in 2011 with 130... They're fucking business.
Yeah, the Hellas Aphrodite, that was the one.
With 138 million euros paid out in ransoms. These are in euros, 6 billion euros. According to the Oceans Beyond Piracy Monitoring Group, the European Union and the Indian navies have taken over a ship used by pirates off the coast of Somalia that was used to seize the Malta flag tanker, the Iranian fishing vessel, the Issa Homamadi. Sorry.
It's a dhow. Yeah. So first they got a smaller ship, often a dhow, which is a kind of a small wooden ship.
That's
in the
one
region.
they took over?
And they used, well, yes. So that tanker is the one they would have taken over.
Whoa.
But the dhow is this small thing that they can use. It's not quite a skiff. It's not a speedboat, but it can tow a speedboat. So they can take the dhow, or the first hijacked ship, and use it as a mothership to go deep into the ocean.
Yeah.
And then when they come near a vessel like that, a massive tanker, they can get in their speedboats and head over.
Wow.
With ladders and AKs.
Yeah, here we go. A team from the ESPS Victoria, a Spanish frigate, boarded the dhow on November 7th and said the Issa Hamadi's 24-strong crew on board were in good condition, safe and free. Iran has not acknowledged the seizure of the ship. Wow.
Right.
Whew. So they go into the citadel and they were good, and then
the crew on that gasoline tanker, they went into the citadel, and then they just waited for the Navy. And a lot of governments don't want to try the pirates. They don't even want that hassle. So when the Dutch Navy came to get this German ship that was the center of the trial in Hamburg, the Dutch said to the Germans, "Okay, we're going to get these guys, but you try them." So that's why the trial was in Hamburg, because that's where the merchant ship was based.
Oh, that's interesting. So they didn't even want a piece of it.
No.
Why?
Well, first of all, the legal systems aren't set up for piracy. Spain's is, America's is, because we have laws that go back that far.
Okay.
Actually, it's a capital crime in America.
Yeah, can you explain that a little more? They're not set up for it?
Germany was founded in 1949.
Yeah.
Right? The current government, the democracy that exists in Germany, was established in 1949. The Constitution was written by the Allies. In 1949, piracy was not a problem. So there was some language about, what was the language? Erpressung auf hohen See. Crimes on the high seas. But they weren't that strong.
That's interesting, because the only thing I'm thinking of in my brain is like, oh, well, where are jurisdiction boundaries and stuff like that?
Oh, no, in international waters, that's when it gets tricky.
Right.
Yeah.
But what you're getting at more is the crime itself, and that surprises me because whether someone's boarding a ship with armed weapons to take people hostage and kidnap people for a ransom or walking into a house on land to do it, I don't understand why that's different. That's
because,
very naive. But
because outside your national waters, different laws are going to apply. The law in Germany is obviously any crime on the high seas against a German interest. Okay. But also the way ships are flagged, the way ships are owned and flagged makes it really difficult sometimes to know who's really in charge of the ship. So this happened to be a ship that was flagged in Hamburg, flagged in Germany and based in Hamburg very clearly. But many ships are flagged in Panama, but they're owned by Omanis or something like that. You know, so which law applies becomes very complicated, and some people just don't want to deal with that. I think in the case of the Dutch, they didn't want to deal with EU, not just Dutch, but also EU regulations about what could happen to the pirates afterwards. And in fact, that was a problem in Germany. All the guys that got sentenced in Hamburg spent less than 7 years in jail.
And then they're sent back.
No. Because Somalia is such a mess. There were humanitarian laws that said we can't just deport people, even if they've been convicted of piracy. So that's kind of screwed up.
All right, so that's why.
Yeah.
So they don't have a good system.
The Dutch didn't want to deal with that.
Oh my! I don't blame the Dutch for not wanting to deal with that. That's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe this is just the world I live in. Like we're a nation of immigrants here, right? We let in people who are coming from places under asylum all the time. I think that's great. If someone is if they're like a murderer or, like someone, an armed robber or something, I don't give a shit if you're from North Korea. Go the fuck
seriously.
back.
No, seriously. I wouldn't expect any different treatment if I were living in a different country. So.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. So that was a problem even then. All right, so you're working at is it Der Spiegel or Spiegel?
Der Spiegel.
Der.
You can call it Spiegel.
All right, let's make that easier for everyone out there.
It is not Der.
All right, sorry, my bad. But so you're working for Spiegel. What was were you on like the crime beat or like international? What was your official lane there?
I was an editor and reporter in the Berlin office.
Okay.
For the English website, but I was going to Hamburg to do independent features about what was happening in the courtroom. And when I went to Somalia, I went on my own because I knew that it was research for a possible book, but I wasn't under contract for a book and I wasn't going as a reporter for Spiegel either. I made all my arrangements independently and I went with another journalist, actually an Indian guy named Ashwin Rahman, who does very good TV documentaries in Germany. So he had been to Somalia before. When I met him, I was in Djibouti. I was doing some early sort of field reporting on the whole topic, and I got on a NATO ship too, actually, in the Gulf of Aden for a few days. But that was very early. I met him there. Djibouti is run by the Navy, and we talked to the admiral in charge. We both got interviews, and we both realized that we wanted to do projects in Somalia. So at first I thought, no, I'm not going to go, and then once the trial started, I started talking to Ashwin about a possible trip.
What really put you over I mean, you're in there in the courtroom, you get to see this up close. It's obviously a pretty wild story. You're seeing the pirates in person too. They've been extradited here to stand trial.
Germany, yeah.
Like, what put you over the top to go, I want to go see this in person?
The story behind it was interesting. I wanted to know how these guys got recruited because they were all defending themselves by saying they were fishermen who got forced and stuff like that. I didn't quite believe that, but I did believe that they had no jobs, and I wanted to know the backstory. And then when I realized that there was a Somali elder in Berlin who I got in touch with who had taken journalists to the same part of Somalia before and brought them back safely, that he was from the same town where half of these guys were from. I thought this actually sounds like it could work.
How old were they? A range of ages, the guys who were arrested?
Yeah, the guys in Hamburg, they ranged from 20 or younger. Actually, one was probably a teenager. to 40 or 42.
Okay, so yeah, so you're talking multi-generational.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of in the culture. And also I forgot, you and I were talking in the kitchen, which was not on the podcast. So
Yeah.
people didn't have this background. But for people out there who didn't hear our conversation out there, how did you end up in Germany in the first place?
I'm part German. So I moved to Berlin ages ago now, but I live in the States again, but I moved to Berlin to be a journalist. I mean, to change the kind of journalism that I was going to do.
Change the journalism you were going to do.
While I wrote my first book, I was a theater critic in San Francisco.
No kidding. You went from theater critiquing to Somali pirates. That is
Well,
a jump.
no, that took years.
I
But
know,
I mean,
I'm kidding.
I don't think I didn't have a job at Spiegel when I moved, but that happened fairly quickly. It was an election year; they needed help, and then I wrote my second book, which was a travel book. It was a book about surfing called Sweetness and Blood, and that took me to places that I had never been before, never thought I would go to. I mean, I surfed in Gaza.
You were we didn't really get to talk about that. You were telling me that. So, yeah, I love little tangents in podcasts. This is a great tangent because I don't know a ton about surfing, but it's a great sport. Alessi, who used to be my producer in here and runs my content, like he's obsessed with it. My buddy Danny
He's
Jones.
a surfer. I don't think I made that connection.
Yeah,
Okay.
Danny Jones, who's another big podcaster, loves surfing. So you've been a lifelong surfer.
Yeah.
Growing up because you grew up in
California.
On the beach. So
Hey guys, this next part right here, normally I absolutely love tangents in podcasts, and Michael Scott Moore and I got into an awesome conversation about all the places he surfed around the world and the cultures that he learned about through surfing there, and it was great. But it lasted about 40 minutes, and I know what the title of this episode is going to be, and so I want to make sure we don't drag it out too much so that people aren't getting to what they came here on the video for. So normally I don't do this, but I'm putting this 40 minutes or so on Patreon. I think it's 35, 40 minutes. And I may put it out on my third channel, the 1 Hour Podcast channel, in a month or two. So you might be able to see it there. But in the meantime, you can check it out on Patreon. Now back to the episode and the story about Michael being taken hostage by Somali pirates.
yeah, but his history's complicated. So it's always good to talk about it and kind of get all the different perspectives. I just like to, I don't like to see narratives just get run with without, significant evidence and stuff like that.
Right.
That's neither here nor there. Anyway, back to your Somali pirate story. That was a nice little tangent right there.
It's a long tangent.
But yeah, so you were, as we said, you were covering this trial where the 10 guys ranging from age 17 to 40 are arrested after boarding was it a German vessel or a Danish vessel?
Yeah, a German vessel.
German vessel. So they're brought into German court. You cover the trial and you're like, shit, I want to go down there to Somalia and see this myself. You meet a fixer in Germany, in Berlin, who takes people there. And that's where we left off.
Yeah, his name was Mohammed Gerlach. He had married a German woman, so he took a German last name. But he was born in Galkayo, which is the city that I was interested in. And and Ashwin, my Indian journalist friend, documentary maker friend, who I'd met down in Djibouti a couple years before, he just wanted to go down there and make a documentary about piracy in general. So we agreed that Galkayo was a good place to go, and we spent a few months talking to Mohammed Gerlach about what the route would be. We would go not just to Galkayo, but also out to the coast, to Hobyo, which really is a pirate town. And that's one that people have probably seen on a map or heard about. But that was on the coast. They actually launched skiffs from Hobyo, and at the time the pirates were in charge. And so we agreed about more or less how the trip was going to go. We agreed on a price for security, and Mohammed got that arranged, and then we went in the first part of January in 2012.
What did security look like?
A bunch of Somali guys with AK-47s, all clan soldiers from the same clan as Mohammed. And the idea was that I was a guest of the clan in Galkayo, is the capital of Galmudug, which is a region. I think the regions have changed a little bit now, but the Saad clan was in charge, and I was a guest of the Saad clan.
Now, was Mohammed giving you intel on just how strong a grip the pirates or groups related to them had in these communities you were going into? Meaning, even if you're the guest of a specific clan and stuff like that, the types of risks you were running against to potentially be captured?
Yeah, he made it clear that we should have security anytime we left the hotel, but that we could go around in Galkayo and have interviews, which is what we did, and that we needed proper security if we were going to leave Galkayo and go into the sort of wilds of the Galmudug state, because again, just like the former president of Somalia being called the mayor of Mogadishu, the regional governor of Galmudug, who had his office in Galkayo in the city, he only had power out to a certain point in the countryside, and then beyond that, it was basically pirate gangs of the same clan or a related clan, actually a related family, a subclan, but they didn't get along. And in fact, we had one guy in our caravan or convoy of SUVs that went out to Hobyo. He was technically the mayor of Hobyo, but he couldn't be there because he wasn't a pirate. And so he was going to take advantage of the fact that we were going there with strength to come with us and to show his face in Hobyo. Whoa. So that was a little political maneuver on his part.
Oh my God.
So that's how unstable it was, and that's how confusing it was.
So what was your plan when you went there? Like, did you have a length of time you were planning on being there?
In Somalia itself or in Hobyo?
Well, let's start with Hobyo and then Somalia itself.
Yeah, we had 2 weeks in Somalia, and during that time we went out to Hobyo for a night for 2 days.
Okay.
So the goal there was just to interview a pirate. So through these clan connections, Muhammad could make sure that a pirate boss would come to a neutral place and sit with us and be interviewed on Ashwin's camera and take questions from both of us. What?
A boss.
Yeah, pirate boss, yeah.
You weren't concerned about that being?
Of course.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, we were worried about it. So we made sure that the security was going to be okay. And we thought this was the most dangerous part of the trip, right? Going to Hobyo was the riskiest bit. So that's what we did. And it didn't go off smoothly, but it went off safely. So we came back to Galkayo and we were fine.
What was it like talking with the pirate boss? Are you talking through an interpreter as well?
Yeah, through interpreters. Yeah. He wasn't very forthcoming. I mean, he did, say some things that were interesting.
Like what?
Well, he at one point he looked at me and he said that he considered himself at war with European ships that were coming down from, not just the Navy, not just the fishing vessels that everybody knew about, but the Navy ships that by that point were in Somali waters to guard against pirates. So, that, first of all, that was uncomfortable, but second, that was something he didn't have to say, right? He didn't have to, he could have just posed as a defender of the Somali coastline or a defender of Somali fishing, which is essentially a bullshit line. But like I said, the roots of piracy were in illegal fishing back in the 90s. But by the time the gangs were powerful enough to take over a tanker, they were no longer just defending the coastline against illegal fishing. So they had grown into these sort of mafias. And so this was a mafia boss telling me that he was essentially at war with Europeans.
How long were you in there with him when you were talking with him?
A couple of hours. So, and surrounded by, our team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Muhammad was in there. All our people from Galkayo, plus a few gunmen, were all there in the room.
His people come too, or just him?
Just him, although his people were probably outside.
Right. Okay. When you go to, because again, there's a language barrier too, but the guy walks in, like you said, you're meeting
his face was covered. He was very quiet and sort of portentous. I mean, a little bit, he was putting on an act too.
Portentous?
Yeah.
It's a big word,
He
portentous.
acted like he was the most important shit. And
a mob boss acting like he's important?
Pretentious.
Come on. Come on. So you sit down with him, you're talking with him for a couple hours. Did he get, he says he considers himself at war with European ships. It's kind of like a pretty bold statement, but did he get frustrated with you at all? Did he get, bulldog in your face at all, or?
No, he stared at me. He stared at me more than he stared at Ashwin. But even though he was on Ashwin's camera, right? But no, it was not like he got aggressive with me or anything like that.
A lot of people are kicking off the new year trying to level up. New routines, better habits, big goals. But if your sleep is garbage, none of that sticks. That's why GhostBed focuses on the one upgrade most people overlook, your mattress. GhostBed is a family-run brand built by people with decades of mattress making experience. Not marketers, not investors. Real manufacturing experts who know how to build a bed that's comfortable, durable, and consistent night after night. Every GhostBed mattress is made with premium materials, cooling technology, and their ProCore support layer, engineered to reinforce the center of the mattress where your body is the heaviest. To put that in English, it means better spinal alignment, less tossing around, and sleep that actually helps you recover. And unlike a lot of big name brands who use hype to justify their prices, GhostBed keeps things smart and efficient. They partner with factories across North America, keep operations lean, and pass the savings on to you. That's why their mattresses cost up to 50% less than comparable brands without cutting quality. With GhostBed, you also get a 101-night sleep trial, a 20 to 25-year warranty, and fast, free shipping. Most orders are going to show up in 2 to 5 days, so your better sleep doesn't gotta wait. As a Julian Dorey listener, you're going to get 10% off GhostBed's already great prices. Just go to ghostbed.com/Julian, that link is in my description below, and use promo code Julian at checkout. Once again, that's ghostbed.com/Julian, link in my description below, promo code Julian. Some exclusions apply, see site for details. So you finish... He leaves.
Right. What happened was, this is in the book too. What happened was that he left, and then the family that had hosted us in this building in Hobyo gave us a bill for lunch. So this was all around lunchtime, and the bill got passed from hand to hand. And Ashwin and I both knew very well that money problems could lead to security problems, right? We had already paid a bunch of money up front for security. And then all of a sudden, the guys who were hosting us and the guys who had driven us to Hobyo were saying, oh, we're getting stuck with this enormous bill from our relatives who were hosting essentially the pirate. And what are we going to do about the bill? And I'm like, you guys are going to pay the bill. We don't have, we're not about to hand over cash right here in the field. We can talk about it later or whatever. But Ashwin and I both knew that was a tense moment. But I think the subclan that was closer to the pirates were stiffing the subclan that was hosting us. And we couldn't tell if that was on purpose, if that was drama, or what was going on. But that was our first indication that something was wrong. But nevertheless, the bill was paid. We drove back. We drove to another part of the coast and spent the night basically on the beach. And then the next morning we drove back.
Wait, you spent the night on the beach, just like camping out?
Camping out, yeah. There was
cool.
It was a known place to camp out, so truck drivers or whatever might stop there.
Now, it's hard to like imagine this because even in the context of this conversation, we're talking about Somalia in such economic disarray, political disarray, violent criminal gangs basically in charge, terrorism going on. It's all awful sounding stuff, but it's in a interesting part of the world. Like, is it beautiful on the beaches and
stark.
stuff?
It's desert, so it's stark. Anybody would have driven past where we were supposed to go down for the beach, but some guys with flashlights came out after being contacted on the phone and sort of led us down the trail. And then so it was lots of rock bluffs around a sort of sandy bay, and we stayed up in the head of the bay where there was, not buildings, but there were amenities. There was a big thatch umbrella, and there was a little sort of lockbox that opened, and all the guys that were all our guards bought cigarettes from a girl who opened the lockbox. So you could get treats and snacks and cigarettes. So it was a known place for people to stay if they were going from one part of the coast to the other. But it wasn't a motel or anything like that.
Did any of the guards speak English at all?
Yeah, a few of them.
So did you get to talk with them,
Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
during this time about like, hey, where are you from? What's life like? Like, what were their thoughts on Somalia and what was going on at the time?
Well, I mean, they were full of a lot of self-pity about the chaos in Somalia. I mean, when it's chaos, nobody can do anything about it.
That's right.
And one of them told me, he asked me how much I thought his bullets cost, because he was there to guard us. He was, he had 2 bandoliers over his shoulders and he was carrying a gun. And he said, how much do you think these cost? I said, I'm not sure. He said, guess. I said, $1 a bullet. He said, yeah. And I said, how many bullets? He said, 500. And that's an unbelievable amount of money that he's walking around with on his body.
Yeah.
And he was bragging about it because the average, I had these numbers in the Desert and the Sea, but an average yearly salary for a Somali was something like half that. Yeah, so less than the amount that he was walking around with in terms of bullets.
Now, another place I learned about, I don't know how much I talked to you a little bit off camera about this, but I don't know how much you had any conversations about this at the time, but my friend Eric Zuliger, who I was telling you about, who became the ambassador to Somaliland for Liberland, which that's a whole separate story right there. But, Somaliland's there. It's supposed to be a part of Somalia, but they have a disagreement. They want to be their own country. There's like 2 million people that live in Somaliland. It's similar terrain, some similar chaos and stuff like that. Did you go there at all, or did any of the guys, whether it be the guards or people you were coming into contact, have like an opinion on what the relationship was
on
there?
Somaliland?
Yeah.
No, not really.
Not really?
But the tensions are the same everywhere. So the tension is always, do we agree with what the federal government wants from us or not? So the main government in Mogadishu has power over the rest of the Somalia to the extent that it can convince the clans in the regions to get along with it, because they are most of the country, and they're armed. In the meantime, they've been organized into this kind of gang or another kind of gang. They all seem to make money from smuggling of one kind or another, or some kind of illegitimate. I mean, how do you say that? Gray market activity. So it might be smuggling sugar across the country. It might be smuggling weapons into Somalia or over to another country, normally into Somalia. It might be smuggling khat, which is a drug.
Yep.
Because there are no laws or no enforceable laws, it's hard to call that an illegal economy or an illegitimate one. But all those organized businesses don't want their action infringed on by the federal government. So, a place like Galmudug had one dominant clan called the Saad, but had more than one clan and members of Al-Shabab to fight with, and some border disagreements to fight over with Puntland to the north. In Somaliland, most of that is taken care of by the fact that one clan it runs it, and they're more stable and more prosperous than most of the other regions in Somalia, and so that's why they want independence. I think a lot of the regions would. The other regions are on different levels of agreement that they belong in the federal government. Some want more independence. Some are, more. Galmudug was technically part of the central government and allied with the federation, but they didn't have that much money. They didn't have that much to offer, and the legitimate government that was allied with Mogadishu didn't have that much power. Like I said, there was a point in the countryside where the power just gave up, and it was the criminals or the pirates who were in charge.
Now, you mentioned something very early on in the conversation. I think I kind of misunderstood you, so I'd love some context here. When you brought up Al-Shabab, which I'm familiar with as a terror group in Africa, I misunderstood you as like me thinking that the pirate groups were working directly with them whatever, and that's not necessarily what it was. But like on the ground in Somalia, we're not talking about on the seas right now, what is the presence, or at the time, what was the presence of Al-Shabaab like, and how much did you know about it?
So Al-Shabaab, so the pirates would be also fighters. So here's the thing about pirates. They were not fishermen. They were not ex-fishermen. Maybe the occasional skiff pilot had some fishing background.
They probably own a pole or two.
A few of them, yeah. A few of them were former fishermen. Yes, most of them were clan soldiers. They were just like the guys that we hired for security. They were young men who had been trained to work in AK-47. That's it. So those young men also fought al-Shabab. So wherever al-Shabab was encroaching on Galmudug, these same guys, the pirates, would go and fight al-Shabab. And they, while I was being held in the countryside, they would listen to Somali radio reports about where the front was, and they would listen very carefully because that was an active problem.
Wow.
Not that I think they threatened to bring me to al-Shabab territory, but I don't think we ever came close to that. But I was, especially in the first few days or weeks, I was very conscious of whether the SUV I was in was headed south or not, because that's where al-Shabab was. I did not want to get sold to al-Shabab.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think I would have either. Dave, can we pull up al-Shabab real fast? Just on Wikipedia, because
So
they're like a widespread group.
And they're an Al-Qaeda related group, and that's the whole business with al-Shabab, is that they were a branch of Al-Qaeda. In fact, the pirates didn't make any distinction between them and Al-Qaeda. They were just just Somali Al-Qaeda members to the pirates. They have existed in strength since about 2006, when we and Ethiopia tried to get rid of something called the Islamic Courts Union, which also had connections to Al-Qaeda, but was less violent and was stabilizing the country. Islamic courts refers to how things get settled. So there's clan justice and there's Sharia law. And the Islamic courts were settling things according to Sharia law, which was more strict than most Somalis prefer. Most Somalis like to smoke cigarettes, listen to music, and that kind of thing. And the Islamic courts were more conservative, but they kept the peace until after 2001, and George Bush and the Ethiopians decided we can't have this in Somalia. There was an embassy bombing in Nairobi.
In Kenya.
Around the time of 2001, in Kenya. That was related to those Al-Qaeda connections. And so George Bush II decided should probably sweep up the Islamic courts. But that was a bad idea, partly because they were stabilizing the country, and second because, and this is a risk for Israel now in Gaza, you get rid of the terrorist group and a worse one comes up in its place. And that's what happened with al-Shabab. So al-Shabab was also taking over territory and essentially instituting Sharia law. And most Somalis, especially my pirates, didn't want to stop smoking, didn't want to stop listening to music. And they're actually, technically speaking, so most Somalis are, most Somalis belong to the Sufi tradition, which is a mystical tradition. You can't say that a whole population is a population of mystics. That doesn't work that way. But Sufism tends to be open to other ideas and other traditions more than hardline Orthodox Islam, and that's one point to the title of The Desert and the Sea. There's an Islam of the desert, which is an Islam of the people who don't encounter the rest of the world and who tend to be very strict, and an Islam of the sea, the rivers in the sea. That
I love that title, by the way.
So of course it's about how I was held on land and on the water, but it's also about the distinctions within Islam.
Double entendre. I love it.
And then that's one, very broadly speaking, that's one thing that we're fighting over.
All right. So I guess the $10 million question here is, or should I say like $50 million question? $20 million. Yeah, they were putting a high worth on you. I'll give you that. But
I was worth a ship.
Yeah.
That's what they were asking for, ships.
Yeah. So how did it go down? How did you sleep on this beach? You had finished the interview with the mob boss pirate. The plan had been you're going to be spending 2 weeks total in Somalia to get this content and research for you to be able to work on the full story here and maybe write a book about it. But like what happened to where you were actually abducted?
We went back to Galkayo safely. Ashwin felt like he was done after that. We spent a couple more days in Galkayo, and I still had some work to do to talk to the families of the guys that were talk to the families of some of the families of the 5 men who were being held in Hamburg. And our original agreement, Ashwin and I, was to go in and out of Galkayo together from Nairobi in Kenya. It's still a significant flight, but the flights don't go every day. The airport in Galkayo is essentially like a bus station. And at some point, Ashwin decided that he wanted to go for more material to Mogadishu. And because Al-Shabaab had more of a presence down there, I didn't want to go. We both stood out, by the way, in Galkayo. I mean, outsiders are very visible in provincial Somalia. And everyone knew that foreigners were in town, right? So, but I, as a Westerner, would have stood out even more, not in Mogadishu itself, but wherever I might encounter Al-Shabaab, you know, you become a target. So I didn't want to go to Mogadishu. Ashwin decided to fly to Mogadishu on a Saturday morning. I still had 2 or 3 days in Galkayo. There was not going to be a flight to Mogadishu back to Kenya that day, but we decided to stay together because we had one guard team, and the hotel was not necessarily secure without the guard team. So I was going to go to the airport, say goodbye.
My pops is always telling me that he wants to feel energized again instead of so worn down. Whenever I've been home, we've been going through workouts together, and he does pretty well, but he could use that extra bump. So I decided to keep it simple and give him something natural that supports his body when he needs it. And that is, of course, Marsmen, which helps your body unlock usable testosterone so you can feel like yourself again. When you really start looking into the science of testosterone, there's a lot going on there. But essentially, a lot of it gets locked up and can't be used. That's because there's this protein called SHBG, which basically handcuffs your testosterone. So even if your body's making testosterone, SHBG locks it up so you can't access it. It's like having money in the bank, but your check bounces. Makes no sense. Marsmen is designed to help free that locked testosterone so that my dad's body can actually use it. There's no synthetics, no needles, just real ingredients that help optimize energy, focus, and strength. Within a couple weeks of using Marsmen, my dad was telling me that his workouts felt stronger, and on what might even be a more important note, the recovery so he could work out effectively the next day was drastically improved. Now get this, for a limited time, our listeners are going to get 50% off for life. You heard that right, for life. Plus, you're also going to get free shipping and 3 free gifts when you go to mengotomars.com. That link is in my description below. It's a perfect way to help kick off your new year strong. Once again, that's mengotomars.com, link in description below, for 50% off and 3 free gifts at checkout. After you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Please support me and tell them I sent you. How long approximately did that take? This sounds like a minute.
Yeah,
like
minute.
Fast, right?
Minute
to
and a
you,
half.
though, I mean, this is like, I can't even fathom
Time
something
slowed
like
down.
this.
Exactly.
What is going through your mind? I mean, obviously, you're like fight or flight trying to defend yourself.
Right.
But
Well, I mean, again, it was seconds, but for the first 2 seconds or something, I was in denial because I thought, okay, never mind. It's a checkpoint, right? There's always checkpoints, unofficial checkpoints in Somalia. So I thought, no worries. I've got my German passport with me in my backpack. We'll flash some ID at the men with guns and we'll go on our way. And then they fired into the air. I'm like, oh, fuck.
oh, shit.
But no, the first thing I thought was, my family. Nobody's going to know what I'm doing or what happened or how I am, right? It's going to be horrible. And I wanted to rewind my life to some time before I was in that situation.
Right. Yeah.
That's what was going through my head.
Now so they get you into their truck basically and they start driving away.
Yeah, they bundled me into an SUV and they had my backpack. And for some reason we went into town first. So we went to a house on the edge of Galkayo and there was a very unpleasant looking man there who came out and he looked really angry and unhappy to see these guys. They handed him my backpack and he went, he waved the truck away, waved the SUV away. He was probably thinking about surveillance. And he was probably happy to have my backpack, but he didn't really want to be seen with those guys. I'm not sure it was the same guy, but a very unpleasant looking guy who I later met was named Ali Dulai, and he was the active commander of those pirates.
Yeah, and you later met him while you were in captivity.
Yeah, within days of my kidnapping, if not the same day.
Was there anyone else who was kidnapped
So
as
maybe
well?
it wasn't the same guy. I'm not sure. No, I think they wanted Ashwin. They kept asking me about my partner over the days and weeks. What happened to the other guy? But I was captured alone. I was my own case, but I was with other hostages almost right away. So they drove me. They drove me across the bush.
And your wrist is broken.
Yeah, my wrist is not broken in half, but
on the radius, like there.
So it's still rearranged, right? And most people have a lump here, have a knob on their wrist. Mine is not there. So I could feel bone moving around in my wrist, and we're bouncing across. So I've got a bloody scalp, I've got a broken wrist, and we're bouncing across the bush, not driving on any roads. My head hit the top of the SUV and left a blood stain. So that's how I identified that car on subsequent days. Are we still in the bloodstain car? But we drove maybe 3 hours like that, and then we came to a campsite, and there were other pirates, other young men with guns, and there was an empty mattress for me to sit on. And I was somehow aware that there were other hostages. And
who were the other hostages? What backgrounds?
Exactly.
Yeah,
they were fishermen. They turned out to be fishermen from the Seychelles. But I met them the next morning. I spent the night on that mattress, and then woke up in the morning. And the first thing the pirates wanted to do was drive us away. It was a beautiful morning. I remember. I mean, in the middle of nowhere, there was just an incredible sunrise. But they put me in the back of the same SUV. I noticed the blood stain, but there were 2 other men in there, and I had never seen them before. And I had heard, while I was a free journalist, I had heard rumors of other hostages kind of around in the countryside when we drove out there. Mm-hmm. It did take us a night to get to Hobyo, so we spent the night somewhere nearby there, most likely. I now know the locations.
Can we back up 1 second, Michael? I'm just really curious about this because this is happening so fast. You took a 3-hour ride after getting kidnapped. You get to this place. You see these other hostages.
Didn't see them yet, but yeah.
Where's once you have had 3 hours, first of all, in the car, are you asking anyone anything, or are you just like, no, I'm kidnapped, I'm silent?
One guy took my cell phone away. I think he threw the SIM card out the window. Otherwise, nobody wanted to talk to me in that particular car.
That's got to be the longest 3-hour car ride.
I think I started to swear. I think when my head hit the top of the car, I started to say "fuck," and the guys in the front seat turned around and said, "No problem, no problem." And they tried to calm me down.
Jesus Christ! But I've broken this wrist 3 times. I have a plate in there. I feel yet.
Yeah.
I got treatment after each getting broken of a wrist immediately.
Right.
You're sitting, I'm trying to imagine this, you're sitting there for how long? Days without any treatment, right?
Days, well, eventually weeks, but yeah.
Eventually weeks, that's crazy.
So I didn't get treatment that first night, for sure. I mean, they didn't even listen to me about my broken wrist, right? Most of them didn't speak English.
That's got to be hurting like a motherfucker.
It hurt, yeah. The first thing they did when we got to the campsite was somebody gave me a totally new guard, somebody who was there, squatted and gave me a bottle of water and a can of tuna.
Thanks.
My first worry was where we were. I mean, by that point, I had no idea of which direction we had driven in, but I was trying to decide based on where the sun was going down, how far north or south we had driven. Because if we had just gone due east towards the coast, we were still in the same territory, which meant that I had been captured by the same clan that had welcomed me, that had hosted me. Or had I been sold to a pirate gang from Puntland, which was to the north, or to Al-Shabab to the south. So that's what I was worried about, and I had no way. It was meaningless worry, but the only thing I could focus on because I had no way of knowing. But the next day, they put us in a car and drove us to a house that I was pretty sure. It felt like Hobyo. It could have been another town. They kept mentioning a different town, Haradere, which really would have been Al-Shabaab territory. I couldn't tell which town we were in, but I knew that I was not yet in terrorist hands. But it was a shitty, rundown prison house. All the guards sort of sat around in the courtyard and chewed khat, which is their leaf drug that they like to eat every day. And that was it. They brought some food, some oatmeal and stuff into my room. The other 2 hostages were in the next room. And very slowly I got to know who they were. But one of them became my friend for the next 9 months. And his name was Rolly Tambara.
One of the hostages?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he and his friend Mark were taken on the open sea in Rolly's little boat. And they were just fishermen, artisanal fishermen from
No one
the
even
Seychelles.
knew they were there, probably.
Their family knew when they didn't come home. How did they learn? I think they must have learned about the kidnapping only when they phoned home.
How do you, yeah. Oh, so they did get the phone home.
Yeah.
Because they're looking for a, okay,
Yeah.
got it. You know, how many days in are we now when you're there, when you get there?
We're on day 2 right now.
On day 2.
Oh, sorry. I had been in the country for 10 days.
Right, but we're on day 2.
Day 2 of my kidnapping.
Kidnapping. So you're just over 24 hours in.
Right.
Are you like walking around like I'm trying to imagine this. You like walking around just holding your arm, or
Yeah, I think I asked. And it must have been within the first day. I asked for something like a sling, and they gave me a piece of cloth that I could rig up like a sling.
did you get some sort of stint to?
No. By day 2 or 3, a translator came in and said, what happened? They said, you're complaining about your hand. I said, what? Yeah, no, my wrist was broken. He said, was it broken before you came to Somalia? I said, no, I'm in the habit of walking around poor countries like yours with a fucking broken wrist. I said, no, it happened during, when I got kidnapped. He said, oh, during the operation. I said, yes.
Oh,
during
the operation. That's
sure.
what he called it.
I said, can you bring a doctor in? And he said, I'll see what I can do. And within the first 4 days, it had to be, a doctor came in at night, and he actually had a splint made of very small slats of bamboo, which he sewed by hand onto my wrist. But he told me that my wrist wasn't broken.
Oh, that's nice.
So, he might have just been a goat veterinarian.
Ask him for his degree.
But that splint and the sling was all I had.
Did that end up, so fast and forward for a minute, did you end up having to get like work done on that after this years later?
No.
So it said it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The pieces eventually fused, and they fused in a way that still gave me full motion. So when I started to feel better, I knew that it was a break, because it didn't feel better until 6 weeks later, right? Which is standard for a break. But after 6 weeks, the pain was receding, and it wasn't, there wasn't bone sort of clicking around in there. And I made sure that I did wrist stretches and everything, because I wanted to be able to type again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it looks great. Minus what you were saying with you don't have the bump there. It looks normal and great. That's wild.
Cheapest treatment probably for for an injury that I've probably ever received.
Yeah, you got the old
treatment.
school.
Yeah,
you got the old school method, if you will. But so you get to this place, they set your wrists. You're over 24 hours in. The adrenaline, I would imagine, has subsided at this point. It's more like, what the fuck? How do you don't know an end point on something like this. Right. You have no idea how this is going to go. You could be here another hour. You could be here another fucking 15 years. You could be dead. In fact, you don't know. But is there a moment you get to yourself where you're quietly, taking some time to collect thoughts and saying, okay, this is my reality. Here's what I can control. Here's what I can't control. Here's how we're going to act moving forward. Did you get a moment like that at this point?
No. I knew that the first thing that had to happen was a phone call, because I knew it was a hostage situation.
You like the joke, I just want my phone call.
That's all I knew. Yeah. And it took a week. So, day after day, I have to deal with these guys who are not, who don't particularly care how I'm feeling. Just for water and food. And after 4 days in that prison house, one morning, I think the morning after the doctor came in. But I don't think it was planned, as a matter of fact. Before sunrise, a truck came in, an SUV came in and sort of rumbled in the courtyard. And anytime that happened, you knew something was up, right? That the sound of an idling motor still bothers me, because that meant that I was going to get moved, and that always meant something was going to change, normally for the worse. So we went out packed into this SUV by armed pirates, and we just drove around at random in the bush. And then finally, at some point after the sun came up, one of the pirates turned around and said, "Are you in the U.S. Army?" I said, "No." "A Marine?" "No." "Colonel?" "No." "Why?" And then they told me this wild story, completely in Somali, that seemed to involve helicopters, gunfire, and dead pirates.
Did you understand any of it?
No. It sounded very bad, but I didn't understand it, and they seemed to be blaming me.
Huh. How did you know it involved those things if you didn't?
I mean,
I guess there's universal hand motions.
There's some sign language that you can't mistake. But I was now in the SUV with one of the Seychelles. So Rolly, who became my very good friend, was also in the back of the SUV, and we were just driving around at random, and we're like, we didn't know what was going on, and we drove around. We did stop for lunch somewhere. And then lunch got delivered. Lunch had a way of getting delivered. So pirates had a support network, and they could get on the phone and order food for themselves and for the hostages. So pasta and or something else.
DoorDash before DoorDash.
DoorDash for lamb.
Pirate DoorDash.
Pirate DoorDash for pasta or lamb. And we probably just had pasta that day. And I remember going to the bathroom, and the bathroom in that little compound was just a bathroom that was open to the sky, right? You could close a door, maybe.
Right.
But it was just a dusty chamber.
Yeah,
right?
it's a hole.
No toilet paper.
Right.
And what the pirate did behind me when I complained about toilet paper was roll a rock in. Like, let's fuck this. So eventually they learned to have toilet paper any place we went to.
Oh, they ordered your toilet paper.
Oh yeah.
That was nice.
They knew that most people outside Somalia did seem to need toilet
Rolled
paper.
a rock in there.
And that went for the Seychelles as well as, I mean, they didn't just do it for white people.
Holy shit. Now, you said you were like asking some of the guards early on for like a sling and stuff like that, and these guys don't speak English, so you're like, making motions and stuff. Did you, outside of the hostages you were making friends with who were there with you, did you encounter any of the captors who spoke some English or that you got to have any sort of back and forth with? Eventually,
yes, but in these first few days, no.
No, okay. So where'd they take you next?
By the end of that day, which, like I said, was a response to some sort of military action, they brought us to a wooded valley. So we had been driving around up to that point just in the very dry savanna, right, the bush. Essentially desert, but not quite. And that night, they took us to kind of a cave at the top of a valley, and we woke up to this magnificent kind of view of a valley full of trees. And then we walked down into the valley. And then we spent maybe the next 10 days under a tree. Not
under
the same tree. We moved from one tree to another tree at one night when there was a fear of a helicopter.
But like a helicopter looking for you?
American helicopter, yeah. Mm. And now the reason for all that was I learned, so this is still January in 2012. The reason for all that I learned in February was that I got the full story in February, was that there had been a U.S. military operation to rescue 2 other hostages in another part of the same state.
Was that where the Navy SEALs got involved or something?
They got Jessica Buchanan and Paul Tisted, an American and a European, while they were camping out under the moon somewhere else in Galmudug. So it was the same region of Somalia. Maybe not the same pirate gang, but maybe some clan relationships. That's what was claimed anyway.
I'm trying to think of the timeline though when you're going under this tree. This is within days of you.
Yeah, so this is still within the first week, and the Jessica got rescued on day 4 of my captivity.
So people didn't even necessarily, you hadn't made your phone call yet. People didn't even necessarily know that you were abducted at this point.
They did because when Ashwin landed, he heard from our fixer that I was, because our fixer, Mohammed Gerlach, was in the car when I got taken out. So Mohammed called Ashwin, and Ashwin had good connections in both the German and American governments. So once he, word got around in Washington, the FBI sent 5 agents to my mother's door. So she was informed within 12 hours of my kidnapping.
Oh, wow.
It happened really fast.
I forgot about that. So they didn't even take your driver. They just took you.
They just took
and
me.
then he was just like, oh shit. So he could go back and report it.
Right. There were a bunch of people in the car. Mohammed wasn't driving, but I was the only person who got kidnapped. Right.
Yeah, you would just think, I mean, I'm glad they didn't, but you would just think they'd just like kill the people that
take
didn't
everybody.
want, or take everybody.
And the story was that if Muhammad, if I was taken from Muhammad, essentially, then there would be a clan war, So I was supposedly protected by, especially this family of Saads.
Yeah.
And if the pirates got involved, then there was going to be real trouble. And I think there was, as a matter of fact, within the first few weeks or months. They probably settled it before I left Somalia, but there was friction.
Well,
and we were part of it.
When they're dragging you over this 10-day period, from like tree to hide under a lone tree. I mean, it's kind of crazy to hear about, but it seems like the way you're explaining it, for a lack of a better way of putting this, you've like settled in to being, hopeless in a way. Like this is where I'm at.
No, I had not. I mean, Rolly, my friend from the Seychelles, had been a hostage for about 3 months at that point, and he was much better at it than I was. I would mouth off, and he would say, "Shh."
Oh, you were still talking shit to him.
I was mouthy. Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Wow. And they weren't like hitting you with the butt end of the AK or anything?
I got beaten a couple of times in those first few days. Yeah. The Ali Dulai, the boss I mentioned, he hit me upside the head.
And you were still mouthing off to him?
Not always to him.
You got some guts though. Wow. Yeah. I mean, you can't, it's not like you're getting out of there. I don't think anyone knows how they would react to that.
Well, I mean, that's what you think too in those first few days is, how do I get out of here? Where, if I leave this camp, where do I go? And so the first thing that happened in that valley under the trees was we did a phone call. So a week after my kidnapping, some other Somalis came to the top of a bluff. And we got walked up independently, Rolly and I, to the top of the bluff. And we talked to a couple of bosses, probably Ali Dulai. In fact, I know Ali Dulai was one of them. The other was Mohammed Garfanji, who was a kind of a legendary pirate boss. I don't think I knew it was him at the time. I think I pieced it together after. But anyway, one of them held a pistol, the other held a phone, and they said, call somebody. And I said, well, you guys took my backpack. Give me my backpack. That's where my phone numbers are. I had a grant from the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting. So I was going to call them in Washington.
From the Pulitzer Center?
They're a foundation that funds journalism, sometimes risky journalism in the field.
Okay, so they would,
because
I got you.
Some stories, it's just a basic problem for freelance journalists, but sometimes you have a good idea, but the magazine balks at the expense before they get a story. So the Pulitzer Center can offer grants for good ideas where the magazine doesn't have to worry about your travel before you come home with a story. So this was a perfect project for them. They don't always, in fact, they're more cautious since I was kidnapped, but they don't always do things in risky areas, but they always do fund good ideas, and they're doing great. By the way, they do good work.
Well, that's awesome. But you call them up like, hey guys.
Well, exactly. And a week was enough time that the FBI had shown up at my mother's door, had shown up at their offices in D.C. The German authorities had shown up at Spiegel, and everybody was ready for a phone call. But when I was up there on a bluff, I wanted to call the Pulitzer Center. I'm like, give me my stuff, right? Where's my backpack? Give me my notebook. Give me my glasses were probably gone. Give me my things. And they're like, no, just call someone. So I called Mom. I didn't know any other phone numbers.
Did you,
by heart.
Did they mention anything about, tell them we want 20 or something like that at this point, or?
Yes. Before I called on the phone, they said, you have to demand $20 million or we'll start to starve you in 24 hours. And I think I laughed. I think I smiled or laughed. And they said, we are serious. And I said, $20 million is not a serious request. But I knew that it was an opening gambit, but it was much higher than I expected the opening gambit to be.
Now, the way you're shit talking now, I'm surprised you didn't go, you mean 20,000, right? Like,
well, and my mom, she was, blown away by the demand. I don't think she had any idea what to expect either.
20 million.
She's like, where are we going to get it? I don't know where we're going to get that. I have no idea what we're supposed to do in this situation, Mom. But her response a few weeks later, so there were phone calls, but it went at a very slow pace, sometime in February, was $8,000.
Was what?
Her counter offer was $8,000, which I rounded up and translated to 10. She said 8, but not more than 10.
Your mom's
said,
on the phone with terrorists like, listen, we're 20 mil, 10 grand, best
maybe
I can
10 grand. So I still on the phone with her. This is now during the day, again with Mohammed Garfanji, but in a different part of the bush. I said, she says $10,000. And Mohammed goes, oh, now she's joking. I said, she thinks you're joking, 20 million. So it went like that for a while.
That's how you're having that conversation too? Like kind of at that tone?
It was
like,
actually
my
like
guy.
that. Not joking, but I mean a little more bitter than that.
Yeah.
But I said she thinks you're joking.
And it's not like you're standing there shackled or anything. You're like talking with them in the middle of this group, kind of like
surrounded by men with
negotiation.
guns. I was not shackled. No.
Right.
I was wearing. They gave me new clothes, so I was wearing cotton shorts, sandals, and some kind of stupid shirt.
Okay. And this is still, we're like a week in, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in while we're doing the back and forth negotiations.
The first phone call was after a week. By the time my mom gave a reply, it must have been weeks after, so in February.
And then what's the name of your buddy again that you met who had been in
That's
there for
Rolly.
3 months? Rolly.
Rolly. So he went up first to the bluff on that first day of my first phone call, 1 weekend. And he, I saw him leave. I didn't know what was happening. He came back down from the bluff and he was all despondent. And he said, he laid on his mattress next to me. He said, I just talked to my family on the phone. They said, we don't know how we're going to get money. We don't know how we're going to buy you out. And I said, how much have they, demanded? He said, 20 million for the two of us. So 10 million each. And I said, that's insane. I know. My family doesn't know what to do. And it was a, hopeless phone call. But he got to talk to his son or son-in-law and his wife. And so he got to talk to some family. And that was nice, but, completely desolate about the negotiations.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
And that was how phone calls went for me within the first year. I mean, there was no movement within year one.
No, but this is what's crazy when we talk about stuff like this that's now, getting farther and farther in the past. I mean, this was 977 days of your life.
Right.
You talk about a year, like, so we went from 3 weeks and for the next year, it just was slow and back and forth.
Right.
But you're living in captivity for a year. Now you get, but not voluntarily, but you get used to it. Like, what was life like? What they were moving you around the beginning days. Did they take you somewhere eventually and you're just kind of chilling there? What were you doing?
Well, it was boring.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Within those first few days, like I said, we were just out under a tree. And then because they got afraid of some helicopters coming kind of close, which made them think about Jessica Buchanan and dead Somalis. They panicked in the middle of the night and we moved, in sandals down some dirt gully until we found another place where they wanted to camp. I think they were making it up as they went along. So, I mean, we finally found a place that was more secluded and more hidden because of tree cover. And they kind of stuffed us in there. But one day after we had moved there, we would wake up, we'd get breakfast. I think, I can't remember if we had 2 meals or 3. I think only 2 meals. And like I said, it would be pasta in a plastic bag that would arrive.
In a plastic bag?
By SUV from somewhere.
African pasta? They cook it al dente? Like, what are we talking?
The Somalis cook pasta because they were colonized by the Italians.
No
so
shit.
They love spaghetti.
So,
But this would be spaghetti cooked somewhere by, somebody's wife, a pirate wife, with chopped onion and maybe salt.
Every day.
Maybe not even salt. Actually, what they did was they stewed the onion in, a little fragment of bouillon cube or something. So salt was really hard to come by. I kept saying, can't we salt the food? Can't you? And they would say, no, we have to buy a big sack of salt like this. Right. We're not going to do that for you. That conversation was later. But
did they give you a Quran or something, like something to read? Like what?
No, I asked for books at one point, and because I had heard this on the radio, another prisoner talking about it on the BBC, and I'm not sure who it was now, but he drew the colophon of penguin books. He drew a little penguin, and he said, "Go find any book with this on it and bring it to me." So I did that. I said, "If you find one of these, it's probably in English. Bring it to me, and it's probably a good book. Bring it to me." And that didn't work in Somalia. It worked for the guy on the BBC. I don't know where he was being held.
So what was a day like?
You woke up, you got pasta after a few hours. I started to do yoga regularly.
Oh, wow.
And the pirates would sometimes try and talk to you in some obnoxious way. And then you would wait for the sun to go down, and then you would sleep.
That's it.
That was it.
Did you walk around anywhere? Or?
No, but I guess something was significant. So after we moved under the second tree, we were staying up on a ledge. And to pee, you had to go down from the ledge and then down the gully a little bit. And so that was an opportunity, from my point of view, to run. So I walked down the gully a little bit further than the guard's sight line, right? Stood there, peed, looked around, tried to imagine what would happen if I ran. I think that spooked the pirates because we had already had, Rolly and I had both had some friction with the guy who was the boss of that band, that immediate group of guards. And
what was the friction?
He was just an asshole. He sort of switched us with a little branch to wake us up that night when we had to move. And I think he hit me and I yelled when everybody was trying to be quiet. So they blamed him for me making noise, right? And then within a few days, here I was scoping escape routes while I peed, and they replaced that guy. And a new guard boss came in who became a pirate that I, started to know. His name was Mohammed Talil. And after that, we got better food, not on the regular, but we got like a full goat that they slaughtered, and then we had goat meat.
How's goat meat?
It's like mutton. It's not that good. I mean, it needs seasoning. It needs salt.
Yeah, I kind of like goats too. Like I don't know
goats are nice, but they literally, they decapitated the goat. They put the goat's head in their own soup. Not for us, I don't think, but we had cubed goat for a couple of days. No, it's not that great. But every now and then they did seem to realize we needed protein.
Are you like losing weight?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about that. But it's subsistence food that they're feeding us. And but when we got a new sort of guard boss, there was a watermelon, a goat, and a couple of other things, and a radio. Somebody slipped me a radio. So all of a sudden.
Oh, wow.
And coffee, I think. So all of a sudden, I was waking up and we could have coffee. There was goat and watermelon for a day or two. And I could listen to the BBC. So I could listen to...
Oh, you got the BBC?
Well, it was a shortwave radio, so I just searched for anything I could understand. Most of it was in Arabic. There were a couple of Chinese stations. And my whole time in Somalia, whenever I had a shortwave radio, BBC World Service was the best thing that I could tune into. The second best in terms of reception, right, was Vatican radio, which was not that interesting, with one major exception. I can talk about that too. And I think now and then I got, was it Deutsche Welle in English or maybe even something like NPR?
So the Vatican radio was interesting when the Pope died?
No, I did. So I talked about I think before we started, I talked about a hole, a news hole that I'm still subject to.
Right, yeah. This guy hasn't seen Interstellar. I'm so excited
that's right.
for you.
I haven't seen Interstellar. I haven't seen, I was, like I said, on my own podcast, which is called Radio Free Mike, I was talking to Jonathan Lethem. When I invited him and told him the name, he said, "Oh, is that like Philip K. Dick, Radio Free Albemuth?" I said, "What?" And that was his last novel, but more importantly, it was made into a film that came out in 2013. I'm like, oh, that's why he expected me to know what it was, because it was a film within living memory, right? Not for me. So there was a year and a half within these 2.5 years, or 2 years and 8 months, where I had no radio, no news, nothing. That's when the Pope changed.
Yeah, he didn't die. They moved out Benedict.
Right.
That's what it was.
So imagine my confusion. When I started to tune into the BBC again in late 2013, I seemed to realize that there was a new Pope. But I also realized that the old Pope wasn't dead. I'm like, what happened? That's never happened in my lifetime. And there was a new president of France. There was a new president in Russia that was kind of planned. I kind of knew what was going on there.
Oh, the Medvedev thing?
Medvedev,
yeah.
I knew, but I knew that was planned.
Yeah.
And a number of people had died, and I had to learn, for example, not until I got free and had been back in society for a while, did I realize that Gore Vidal had died. I think I learned when I first got my radio back in late 2013. The first death I learned about was Lou Reed. So I heard about that in real time, and that hit me.
Did you miss
hard.
Whitney Houston too?
Yeah, when did she die?
I think 2012. I want to say, can we check
I
that?
probably had to learn that afterwards.
Yeah.
That might have come up on the BBC, like in hindsight. So a few things I got filled in on. But there is a special, I mean, I think I'm caught up on the deaths, but I am not caught up on movies.
That's, well, you're with the right guys here. We got you. Yeah, I was explaining for everyone out there, we're talking about like the production Chris Williamson just did with Matthew McConaughey, where he took him back to Cooper's farm on Interstellar. And Michael was like, "Oh, I haven't seen that." I'm like, "Oh shit, that was when you were in Captivity."
Right.
All timer.
Yep.
You're gonna enjoy
Absolutely.
that. Very, very good storytelling. As well.
Normal story around me.
Yeah. So you're getting the BBC. What was the interesting thing on the Vatican radio though? If it wasn't when the Pope was being turned over?
It was a homily that the new Pope gave, and this was very late in my captivity. So this was in 2014.
What was so fascinating about it?
He talked about forgiveness. And at that point, I was just at my wit's end. I mean, I was ready to pick up a gun. So
what month are we in? Like
that would have been the spring of 2014, and I got out in the fall.
What I was living in Rome in the spring 2014, about a half a mile from there. Yeah. Was it an Easter homily?
It was an April homily. I don't think it was Easter.
Easter was in April that year.
Yeah. I don't think it was strictly about Easter. I looked it up because I quoted it in The Desert and the Sea. It was a very affecting story. I mean, he just talked about, you can imagine, you think, when you sit there alone, you think about everything you've done wrong, right? I mean, you think about what you did to get into this situation, first of all the misjudgments. And I also tried to escape from the ship. So I was on a ship. That didn't go well. So I was sitting there, full of things that I had done wrong, and also full of hate for these guys who were walking around with guns around me. And the guns were littered on the floor. And occasionally I was left alone with them. I mean, very occasionally the guards just left me alone in the room and carelessly left a gun behind. And every time that happened, I went through the paces in my head. Okay, a couple of steps to the gun, safety, hope it's loaded with real bullets, not blanks, or loaded at all. There's the magazines there. How many men are in the house? Not sure. Some calculations.
Oh yeah.
But every time I was left alone within a few paces of a gun, I did think about that. I mean, your mind constantly thinks about what it can do to get out.
What stopped you from doing that each time?
Caution, and then after I heard the Pope, I had a completely different mindset.
But that's late. So let's come back to that. It's interesting. So where we kind of left off here was still pretty early. Like we were going through that first year where you're getting used to just waking up, and then eventually you have the luxury of coffee and a radio. I put that in huge air quotes. and you're passing the time for the sun to go down. They're moving you spot to spot, tree to tree, staying away from things. And you're with Rolly this whole time?
Yep.
Are there any other hostages as well with you consistently?
No, they split up, Rolly and Mark. They left maybe because Mark was a little more frail and possibly not. I mean, Rolly was in his 60s, but not up for a hike through the woods or whatever. But also it was probably strategy. They decided to split up the two Seychelles, and Rolly and I became great friends. And it was only when I think we got a very warm rainstorm in February that we packed up really quickly at night and drove back into town.
February 2012.
Yep.
So that's only like a month in.
Yep.
Okay. Now, by the way, that kind of friendship where there's no one else around and there's only one person there that can relate to you in a way, obviously you've had plenty of friendships in your life, but if there's like a silver lining and stuff like this, you don't get much closer of a bond, I would imagine, than you guys kind of had.
No,
right?
it was terrific. Yeah. Yeah.
And you guys are still friends to this day?
Well, he's died in the meantime, but I went to
I'm
see him
sorry.
twice in the Seychelles. So I got to know his family. His family's terrific.
That's cool.
Yeah. No, it was great.
That's really cool.
At some point when, they kept us together even when they put me on a ship. So they put us both on a ship that they had captured.
When was that?
In the spring. So in April of 2012. And at that point, Rolly were in. So I just said that we went because of a rainstorm into town. When we went to stay in a ruin, basically a ruined house that I suspected was an Italian colonial house. We were still staying there, although we'd probably gone out into the countryside a couple of times, but we were still based in that house when a ship appeared on the horizon. Or closer in, I mean, really a mile out in the water. You could see it from the house. It was parked maybe just outside Hobyo Harbor, if Hobyo can be described as having a harbor. Doesn't really have one. And we'd go out of the house to pee at night. We'd see lights. We saw the ship in the morning. It looked pretty large, 50 meters long. I mean, not a warship, but I didn't have glasses, so what did I know whether it was a small warship or not? So, what kind of a ship is it? And eventually one of the pirates told Rolly, it's a ship that we've captured. And he said it was Chinese. I was looking for I thought very possibly there was going to be a flag on it and the pirates were getting pressured by the Navy or something. No chance.
But it was,
So it was a hostage ship and they put us on board 2 or 3 weeks later.
And were there other hostages on there already?
Almost 30 of them. So altogether we were 30, and they were from all parts of East Asia. So 10 of them were Chinese. In fact, it was a Taiwanese-run ship and Omani. And everybody else was from Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, and so on.
Any English speakers?
The Filipinos.
Okay.
So 5 guys.
So you have at least some people to talk to now, too.
Our first morning, I think we slept up on a top deck or something. So getting to the boat was, alarming and dangerous on its own. But we went over on a skiff at night and went over the gunwale.
Is Muhammad still your guard at this point? The guy that they replaced?
Oh,
the guy that you hated that they replaced, and then you said the guard they replaced him with it was nicer was Muhammad?
Yes, Muhammad Talil. He was the guard team leader until this point.
Okay.
I saw Muhammad twice more on the ship.
And you got along with him?
I got along with him, yes. Because at one point, Rolly and I were separated, and I was living in what we called Muhammad's house. And Muhammad would talk to me. He didn't have very good English, but he would talk to me anyway. And he told me, Somali words and that kind of thing.
Did you let
he was amenable? He was talkable too.
Even though he's your captor and guarding you, did you find yourself like in that shared? Hey, I have to talk to this person. I'm here. He's here. Like there's
who else do you talk to? Yeah.
But did you find? I don't want to say did you find yourself liking him, but you guys got along. Like, was there a weird moment where you're like, man?
That happened with a few guards where you in a different circumstance you could be friends. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, did you? See, I can't imagine how I would just be pissed. But,
I was pissed most of the time, but you can't be pissed 24 hours a day.
Right. You know,
I can't.
I'm always careful how I say this. Obviously, people they grow up, they make their own decisions. They can make good decisions or bad decisions. Some environments force more good decisions than bad. Others force more bad decisions than good, but people have to kind of live with the decisions they make. That said, did you ever, like, you're going around the country, like you've seen how this place is, you've seen how people are, you see some of the destitute nature of it. Did you ever find yourself thinking about even some of the guards you didn't like and saying, you know, don't like him, bad guy, feel bad for where he came from?
I knew that before I went to Somalia. I mean, I knew everybody was poor. I knew that the reason people became pirates was not necessarily because they were frustrated fishermen, but because they had no other job opportunities. We talked before about the difference between Al-Shabab and pirates, but what they had in common was that they were hierarchical structures. They were basically the only companies in Somalia, right? If you're a young man with gun skills and you want to make proper money instead of eking out a living for your family, what you can do is sign up with the pirates or sign up with Al-Shabaab. And with Al-Shabaab, of course, you have to pretend to be devout, but that's not a religious organization, right? Those guys are hypocrites just as much as anybody else. They're an organized criminal outfit. That's right. And so are the pirates. What's the difference? You have an opportunity to move up in a hierarchy. You know, everything else is in ruins, but these two sort of pyramid structures exist. I knew that.
It would be very hard for me to be present with that, though. I know you're there for a long time, so maybe you finally have a minute where you calm down. But, you know, that's like radical empathy in a situation like that.
It wasn't radical empathy. It's just a fact I knew. I don't think it changed my feelings until, you know, that spring in 2014.
Right. All right, so you get taken to this boat. There's 30 other dudes on there. 5 of them are Filipinos. They speak some English. So how long are you on this boat for?
6 months. The full summer of 2000. I'm the only Western journalist to see a boat that was hijacked. So, of course, we have reports like from Captain Phillips about what it's like to be on a ship that's been hijacked in all kinds of languages. But one thing you couldn't do as a journalist was get on one of those boats.
And live it, yeah. What was it like? I mean, you're on a boat in the middle of the water for 6 months.
It was better than being on land because
Really?
there were no insects. Flies and mosquitoes were a constant problem on land. It was nice being on the water. I like the water. Most of the time, the swells rocking the boat were kind of nice. Water was calm most of the time. There were a couple of storms, but, you know, there are worse ways to spend your captivity, and the food that came out of the kitchen was decent compared to the slop we got fed on land. The food stocks were still up in that ship. You know, the ship had gone out from with months worth of food in the kitchen and in the freezer. So there were 2 cooks who went back to the kitchen, one Chinese and one Filipino, who would come out 3 times a day with a pile of rice and some stewed vegetables. And it was a tuna fishing boat, so every now and then they would haul up a frozen tuna and carve that up with a power saw and make either tuna soup, which is what we had most of the time, or sushi.
Nice.
So every, 3 weeks, they left a brick of frozen tuna that they had carved up to defrost in the freezer or in the fridge or whatever it is, a warmer part of the freezer, I suppose. They let that thaw, and then they brought out the rice for dinner with some some other vegetables and some other things, and we could all take a few slices of tuna. I mean, that's what the ship was doing. The ship was catching tuna for sushi in Japan.
Now, what?
That was its main market. It wasn't a Japanese ship.
Did the type of day change here, or is it still kind of like you wake up, you have your coffee, you listen to the radio, you talk with the boys, and
maybe some fry bread out of the wok. So Coffee and donuts. That's what we had the first morning. So we had been sleeping on the top deck, and then they brought us down to this bottom deck. And the ship had only been captured 3 weeks before. I mean, we saw when it arrived. So all these guys were new at being hostages too. Nobody was particularly happy, but they were all very young, curious guys who stood around in a circle, 28 of them, and stared at us. And then when the pirates put us under this conveyor belt that was used on the ship for tuna. So that was our place. That was our position. We sat there, and everybody sort of stood around the edges of the work deck and looked at us. And the Filipinos got to work on coffee and basically donuts, so fried dough in a wok. And very slowly, that stuff made the rounds. Everybody got some fried dough. So that morning, for the first time, this is now 4 months after my captivity, I'm served coffee and donuts.
That's got to be heavenly, right?
And we can talk to strangers who speak English, and they told us about how they got hijacked. The captain had been killed.
Oh, shit.
And his body was in the freezer.
Oh.
Yeah. It was bad.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So you can imagine the mood on the ship towards the end of the summer when the pirates were trying to pressure the owners and they cut off the power.
Wait, what? What happened?
They cut off the power because they wanted everybody to be afraid for the survival of the ship, and then get on the phone to their families and to the whoever else, their embassies.
And they're cutting the power, so that means the refrigerators and freezers go out too.
Everything starts to thaw.
Oh,
yeah. But the pirates did that for a total of 1 day, or basically the bright part of a day.
Oh, that brings it home.
Which is bad enough, but as long as we were on the ship, typically there was one motor going for a generator, and not to have that sound in the background, and not to have water flowing, which we always had hoses that we could, they were saltwater hoses, but that's how we showered. Not to have all that flowing. The bathroom was just a corner of the deck that washed out into the sea. Mm-hmm. Not to have water flowing, and not to have electricity, so we couldn't use the wok. That was stark. That was a feeling of death on the ship. And everybody knew about the captain, and everyone was thinking about the tuna.
Oh my God.
So
now, are you phoning home at all during this time? Are you talking with anybody?
Yeah, I made a few phone calls from the ship, and my mom said she could always hear the wind. So she would ask where I was, and I wasn't supposed to tell her where I was, but it was clear that I was on a ship.
Yeah. Now after the fact, fast and forward for a second, just looking back on it, you're gone for 977 days. How did your mom adjust to that back at home? Obviously, she's not a captive, but her son is halfway around the world, God knows where, with some of the most dangerous people. She can't get him home. I mean, what's that? How did she stay present? I don't know. I don't even know how to ask that question.
Yeah, no, she said that she went to bed every morning worried about what would be in her email the next. She went to bed every night worried about what she would read in her email the next morning.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So she was getting constant updates that were basically status quo.
Well, yes. The updates weren't that constant, but when they came, they weren't that interesting, I imagine. I think the FBI came over for phone calls only every so often, every couple of months. They would not be on the phone. They would sit and listen to the phone call, and because she could handle herself on the phone, they let her be the voice, but they told her what to say, or they gave her tips to negotiate.
Every time that you were on the phone with her, were you on speaker with the pirates around, or did you ever talk to her privately as well?
I think that changed every now and then. The first few times, there was definitely a speakerphone situation, and the top pirate boss, Mohammed Garfanji, was there. They did give... There were a couple of phone calls that were done from a prison house, and the negotiator was actually somewhere else in Somalia. So it was a sort of triple connection that they had set up. So a negotiator and a boss would be over here, and they would talk to my mom without me on the phone. Then they would include me, and my mom and I would talk, and it was not quite clear if somebody was on the other end. You had to assume they were. But we did manage to say a few things in German that the Somalis didn't pick up on.
Oh, I forgot you guys had that in the back pocket.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, what were you saying in German?
I can say this now, but at that point, during a phone call from a prison house sometime in 2013 or whatever, I actually described where I was and said that every now and then I send my very bright colored clothes out to be dried in the courtyard. So I described the clothes.
Ooh.
Yeah, because I knew there was aerial surveillance. Everybody knew there was aerial surveillance.
Now, did they tell you after this whole ordeal if there were similar plan, like Navy SEAL type missions that they had for the other abductees that you mentioned 4 days in? Mm-hmm. Were they trying to do that with you as well during this time, but just weren't able to pull it off?
They were, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know more about it now than I did when I wrote The Desert and the Sea, but I think the most advanced plan was to get me off the ship. And I understand that went wrong because of some trouble with the drone.
What kind of trouble with the drone?
Not sure. So everything has to be perfect.
Yes.
If they're going to send in SEALs, and everything wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
The early thing I heard was that they were planning to go on a cloudy night and the fucking moon came out. That's what an Irish guy in the security industry said to me. That was apparently not quite the case, but it doesn't matter. All the intelligence, all the predictable things for an operation like that have to line up. And for whatever reason they didn't, and they called it off.
That's what the guys I've talked to about Captain Phillips and that situation have said. Like, it all was just boom, 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 done. Like they had it, everything to a T. Because you're on the high sea. It's like,
you're on the high seas, but I mean, they really had a controlled situation once they had the small safety boat, the small boat that he was in, tethered to a Navy ship. So that's a great advantage. Yeah. Unfortunately, he was in there with gunmen, and those 3 SEALs had to shoot at exactly the same time. Get rid of 3 guys at once. That's an incredible kind of.
I'm trying to remember. I don't want to say this wrong. I had Daniel Corbett in for episode 241. He was on that team.
Yep.
I can't remember if he was one of the shooters or not. It's badass motherfucker.
Badass.
Yeah, that's a crazy mission.
A few of these guys have sort of come out to introduce themselves to me. So the guys who would have come to get me. So that's how I know a little bit more than I used to.
What's that conversation like?
It's
where
great.
They're like,
no,
fuck, man,
they're such great people because if everything's in line, they're happy to do it.
You're right.
That's the job. But one guy, the first guy to do it, he wasn't a SEAL, but he was a Green Beret. Army Special Forces, and he was ready. He was waiting in Djibouti, so he had a dossier on me, and he just happened to be in the audience when I gave a talk for Hostage US. This is back Hostage US is a nonprofit I work for. In 2019, I gave a talk, and afterwards he came up to me and said, I would have suited up to come get you. I didn't realize it was you who was going to be speaking tonight, but after a minute, I noticed, I know who this guy is.
Oh my God.
And we know each other now.
That's so cool after the fact, but that's crazy. So you're on that boat for 6 months. This is spring into fall, I guess.
That's right.
2012.
Until September, yeah.
And then how does that end? They just come one day and take you off the boat?
5 or 6 months. Well, no, I tried to escape.
Ooh.
So I was thinking, first of all, on the ship, we're only a mile from shore, right? The waves go into shore. Right?
I know, there's some sharks in that water.
There are sharks. There was a lot of fish. Actually, we were anchored over a coral reef, so we did a lot of hand fishing, and we got extremely beautiful and large fish.
Yeah.
Sea bass and snapper and stuff like that. So a target for sharks. I knew that. But at some point, our anchor chain broke. So the rusted old chain that we were sort of relying on all this time actually just snapped in the middle of the day. And within 20 minutes, one of the aerial surveillance planes that we were used to seeing turned up. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And that night we were moving along the coast. The crew got the ship under control because we had started to spin in the water. So the crew got the motor running and got us under control and moving, I think, to the south. And I thought, we're just going to go on to land in a matter of days. I didn't know what the plan was, but I thought this time on the ship has come to an end. But I had already tried to arrange like a helicopter visit where I would jump off the ship and stuff like that. That didn't work. But I thought the fact that this plane showed up within 20 minutes, that's interesting. Maybe there's an aircraft carrier nearby. At the very least, we're being followed by a drone. There's no other way that the Navy would have let that happen because they knew I was on board. So I thought I was thinking of Captain Phillips, if I can separate myself from the ship and be recognized by a drone, which had to be following the ship because the ship had no anchor. Mm-hmm. I mean, by that point, hours afterwards, after the anchor broke, everybody had to know what the situation was. So I found a way to get out of my cabin that night. I think I asked to go get more toilet paper, went down to the work deck where a bunch of people were still awake, said hi to the Filipinos, pretended to get some toilet paper, and I noticed that the guy who came downstairs with me was not armed with a gun. So I thought, this is my chance. Kicked off my sandals, made a running leap for the side, and jumped 20 feet into the water. It was the best swim of my life. It was great.
How far did you make it?
So I was worried about gunfire. I had looked at the direction of the swell. We were going like this. The swell was going like that, sort of towards the rear of the ship at an angle to the shore. I thought I can swim with the swell just under the surface like a dolphin. I had watched dolphins swim while I was on board thinking about it. And I got within a minute, I was 100 yards away from the ship. All that went brilliantly well. Not a shot was fired.
No one.
There was a lot of yelling.
I was going to say, you hear like screaming in the background.
But from the sound of the motor, which sounded terrible, I didn't think they could turn the ship around. I just thought they're going to have to try and rustle up some pirates to come find me from land. And either I was going to die or, with any luck, the military was going to be able to send a helicopter before the pirates got to me.
So what happened?
I had looked at the swell. I swam with the swell, and the swells were big. So half the time when they had searchlights out looking for me, I could kind of hide behind a mound of water, and I could kind of submerge myself. The Indian Ocean is also a lot saltier than I was used to, so I was more buoyant, and it was warm. So I wasn't worried about hypothermia. I wasn't really worried about sinking and drowning. But I didn't think, and when I did it, I thought I would swim to shore. What the guy running the ship did, I think it was one of the engineers of the hostage crew, was he stalled the motor and let the ship come rolling in on that same swell. And I knew from surfing that a larger craft was going to be faster than a smaller craft. So it got close to me, and it was going to overtake me if I just tried to swim in the same direction. So I swam this way, that way, tried to evade, and then thought, forget it, that's not going to work.
And
because
you wait for them to grab
I was
you?
out there for about half an hour. I tried to be quiet and listen for helicopter blades or something.
Oh my God.
Right? But I had jumped with a little cigarette lighter that had an LED on the end. I had wrapped it in plastic, hoping, because I had spent the summer flashing SOS out my porthole window. So I figured if I could escape, maybe with this thing intact, the lighter with an LED, maybe I could flash it from the middle of the water, and that was hopeless.
And then you see it, so you give it. Do you just like hold your hands up and wait for them to get you?
The ship came very close to me, and by then the crew had taken out a rope with a life preserver, and I had seen that done too because they had done some work on the anchor chain before. So these guys lined up with the rope. They flung out the preserver. I grabbed it, and they hauled me up the side of the ship.
You get the shit kicked out of you when you got up there?
Surprisingly, no. The first thing they did was ask me why I had done it, and I was not planning to come back on the ship, so I had not worked out a cover story. But the fact was that a couple months before, they had brought me and Rolly to shore to do they tortured Rolly.
They tortured him?
They strung him up by his feet, and they They beat him with a bamboo pole, and then they kind of threatened to do the same to me. And then they put us both on the phone, and we were supposed to yell for mercy and order, a delivery of $20 million or whatever it was. The negotiations had not proceeded, right? At this point, 9 months into my captivity, the demand was still $20 million. If negotiations had been underway, I also wouldn't have done it. But what the pirates, the main boss, promised me on land that day, which was in May, was that they were going to sell me to Al-Shabab on the next occasion that they brought me on shore. So in September, when I jumped, I had a story. I said I was afraid of getting sold to Al-Shabaab. I didn't want. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, that's kind of...
That's a good reason to jump. You're forgiven.
The boss I've been talking about, Ali Dulai, he came on board the next day, and he did beat me. I mean, he took a full water bottle and beat me while I was lying on my bunk. But it could have been worse.
Jesus Christ. What a roller coaster. And then that was after that, then they took you on land because you were on the boat for 6 months. And I said, like, how did that end? You tried to escape. So after this escape, they take you back on land somewhere?
Yeah. I think they left me in my cabin in solitary confinement for a few weeks, 2 weeks, maybe 3. And then sometime into September, a bunch of pirates I recognized from land came out to the ship, and we piled into a skiff and rowed onto land, I think near Haradere, where I had been afraid of being before. But we drove far enough that I think we were probably in Hobyo again for a couple of nights. There was gunfire. I don't know why, but somebody seemed to figure out that I was there and tried to, threaten the pirates. So we left in a hurry again, and then pretty soon I was back in Galkayo. And they tried to tell me that I was not in Galkayo. They tried to tell me I was in Haradere. But I knew the difference between those two towns. Haradere is a very small town. They tried to say, we're surrounded by Al-Shabaab. Don't try and go anywhere. You're going to get caught by terrorists if you go anywhere. But the first morning, first of all, I woke up to the sound of a plane landing, and I knew that from being in Galkayo, that Galkayo had cot flights, flights full of leafy drug that landed every morning around sunrise. That's the first thing I heard. And then they brought some breakfast over from a restaurant, and it actually had a sticker that said Galkayo on it.
Nice job, fellas.
And they were actively that morning trying to convince me that I was in Haradere. And I knew Haradere had no airport.
Did you try to escape again once you knew that?
No. I mean, I thought about it plenty of times, but I didn't have my glasses, and I couldn't see well enough to make. I imagined. I'm thinking of one moment when I was in a different part of Galkayo. No, it was the same compound where they put me for the first week. They put me in a different building in that compound, and I knew where the bathroom was, and I knew how high the bathroom wall was, and I thought that if I was quick, I could get around to the bathroom and over the wall. Because the last time I had been to the bathroom, there was some junk in there that I could use to climb over. I'm glad I didn't try, but it's possible that if I had better eyesight, I would have that day.
Why are you glad you didn't try?
Because it probably wouldn't have worked. I probably would have gotten... Because what that plan would have depended on was a friendly person in a car outside on the road. Because the first person I met was going to be the deciding factor about whether I was returned to the pirates or whether I could be taken to like a UN compound or something. I had been to a UN, what was the branch? The UN, whatever it is for displaced persons, I think. The UN had a presence around Galkayo, and as a free journalist, I'd gone to one of them. So I knew where friendly people were, as a guaranteed matter, not, you never know the average person on the street, whether they're allied to pirates or have a relative in the pirate gangs or not. But I did know that I did think that if I got to one of those UN compounds, then maybe there would be enough time for a friendly person to be on the phone to someone official. But, UN guys aren't armed. That's not really fair to put those someone like that in that position, because the first thing that the pirates are going to do is track me there with their rifles. So all that was going through my head that afternoon. And there were two stories. So I'd heard one story on the radio, either before or after this, about a guy, I think being held by Boko Haram, a Frenchman, who got out in a similar fashion. I think he was behind locked doors, but he found a way to get out while his guards were sleeping. And my guards slept in shifts, so that was never a possibility. And he got out, and he flagged down a moped and got on the back of a friendly moped. And that's how he escaped. And that was a magnificent story to hear on the BBC while,
You're like, fuck, there's
while
hope.
I was there. And another story that was on my mind was David Rode, who's now a good friend of mine, but he was a New York Times reporter who was held by the Taliban. And he got out of where he was thanks to his fixer, who was also being held hostage. And they went, I think they were being held just inside Pakistan. And by moonlight, which happened to be bright that night, they got down from a second story, I think, down out a window with a rope, and then away from the Taliban guards while they were sleeping again, and far enough away and over the border into Afghanistan. Either way, they went towards a military base that they knew, the fixer knew was nearby. So without the fixer to navigate, he wouldn't have done it. But magnificent story, and I knew that before I went to Somalia. So David was on my mind. And a story I heard afterwards was, and then this was a direct result of me jumping off the ship. One of the more adventurous Chinese guys, towards the end of the lifespan of the ship, which broke down in mid-2013.
The same one you were on.
The same ship, the Naham 3. When he knew that the ship was going under and everybody was going to have to get moved to land, he saw a ship in the distance, and hoping it was a military ship, he swam for it. And I think he got to land. He made it to shore. But the first family he found was a poor nomad family with a clan connection to the pirates. So he was collected in short order and beaten.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Now, when you are thinking about it in that bathroom about making that run and you don't end up doing it, this is still like end of 2012, right?
No, that's probably more like 2013.
Okay.
If
So,
not
but you still
2014.
have, you didn't get out. You were there for 2.5 years.
Yes,
more than
once they
2.5
moved
years.
me off the ship and then back to Galkayo, I stayed in Galkayo the rest of the time.
In the same place?
Another 2 years. No, they kept moving me from prison house to prison house, and sometimes just to shake things up out into the countryside. But I was based in Galkayo for the rest of the time.
Besides hearing some radio reports and, walking in a circle around where you are, talking with Rolly and, maybe sometimes with the guards and whatever for a little humanity, how did you keep your mental intact for that long without going nuts?
That's a good question. So, let's see. I had tried to take notes during the period before going on the ship and had the notes confiscated once, I think. Then I found a notebook on the ship, kept my mind stable by writing in that notebook. Those got confiscated when I got off the ship. And then at some point, I got notebooks again and started to fill them up. And by then, I knew not to keep a journal. I started to write fiction.
Oh, wow.
And
you had written a fiction book before,
yeah,
right?
my first book was a novel.
Yeah.
And this was the beginnings of the book that I'm finishing up now. So this is a book, I even mentioned it on Joe Rogan, but I've been working on it for a long time. But this is a book about a police chief who starts a drone program. So drones were on my mind.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was translating it to an American context, and it happens to be more relevant than ever. So I started to fill up notebooks again, and that helped. The other thing I did was yoga.
Right. You were saying
So when we moved into a prison house, almost immediately, a comfortable prison house. The first place we went to in Galkayo was a pit. We returned there a couple of times too. But when we settled in what I realized was probably a pirate boss's house that was still under construction. So probably a boss within my case who was just wanted more ransom money. No furniture, concrete floors, mosquitoes, camping out on concrete, basically, flickering lights. I mean, barely any electricity. There was lots of floor space. And so I asked for a mat. And they said, a mat, okay. I knew the word for mat. They brought me a mat the next day. And so I started to do yoga. I was looking for the right moment to do it where nobody was looking, but because I had jumped off the ship, there was always a guard in the doorway looking at me. So after a while, I'm like, fuck it. I started to do yoga. Then all of a sudden, there were 7 guards looking at me, through the through the doorway. And
you're doing
like,
downward
Michael,
dog.
what are you doing? Oh yeah, no. I had a routine memorized. So then they started to come in with like flats from cardboard boxes for their mats. It was a dusty floor, right? Dirty floor.
And they're doing it with you.
So they started to do it with me.
Oh my God.
So first it was sarcastic, but after the jokesters sort of fell off after the first couple of days, for 2 weeks there were guys who were coming in to do it with me because they realized they needed exercise too, because they were also locked into the compound, and they're like, yeah, I'm wasting away here too. I'm going to do some exercise with Michael.
Are you still, I mean, I guess that's really cool, but how often are you phoning home, or are they having you phone home to continue negotiations?
We did one phone call almost right away when I was back in Galkayo. We drove a long way into the bush to do it, so they were always looking for a different cell phone tower to connect to, I think. But then not very often. I think we did 3 phone calls between that fall and the next January.
Wow. And
so the January, which was the 1-year anniversary, I thought, okay, now there's going to be some movement. There was movement only after the ship. And I thought by January, they're going to have it figured out. My mom said, no, we're still millions and millions of dollars apart. And after that, the Somalis, to pressure us. So they said, stop the phone calls. So for also about a year and a half, I didn't hear from my mom, didn't hear from the outside world at all.
Did you ever lose hope?
Yes.
What's that like?
So people say, how did you maintain hope? And the answer is I didn't. I stopped trying to hope. So that's a different thing. I did consider suicide a couple of times. Again, grabbing a gun. I wondered if things had stalled altogether or whether people were even still working with the pirates, trying to figure it out. I thought that suicide might just be the best solution. And then I heard the Pope, and I decided to just approach it in a completely different way, meaning I'll forgive my guards. I'll just forgive the guys immediately in my face every day. Right?
You're hearing the Pope, though, over 800 days in. This is April 2014.
Yeah.
So you were there for 9 days. This is towards the end.
Towards the end, in the final year.
And you turn on the radio one day on the Vatican radio, you hear this homily.
He told a story which I think turns out to be a very old story that's not totally divorced from Christian mysticism. He said that, sometimes at night you see all your sins. You think about all your sins like you see all the stars. And he said, but in the morning the sun rises and does away with the stars. And he said, the mercy of God is like that. And the point is to pass it on. The point is to apply that mercy to other people. I said, well, I can probably do that. That was a very emotional thing to hear for a captive. And this is Pope Francis, right? And the homily was in Italian. You could hear him in the background speaking Italian, and there was a translation on the radio. And I thought, well, I can try that. I can apply that to, at least to the guards, maybe not to the bosses, but to the guys who were walking around with guns. And it worked. I mean, it settled my mind. What it did was it eased the constant tension. I thought it was my job to be resentful every day and angry and high-strung. And no, there was another way to approach it. And that was a simple shift in my own mind. And that made an enormous difference.
Wow. also is like a huge. You want to talk about taking the high road?
I didn't have a choice. But yes.
Yeah, but still, you say you didn't have a choice. I understand what you mean by that, but
that's the only thing I did have. As a matter of fact, that was the only form of freedom I had. That's true.
What I'm saying.
That's true.
I think you just made a really difficult choice, one that would be very hard for any other human being to make. And ironically, in forgiving them in the midst of still captivity, it's not like you suddenly walked out of there right after this, but you got your own freedom in that way, just in your mind.
Right.
And that might have been a symbolic first step to what ended up actually solving itself. I don't know, but sometimes I believe like the universe lines up in a weird way.
That's how it felt. And it was certainly the first moment, the first small step towards freedom.
Right.
That year. Then the next thing that happened is that somebody tried to come get me kind of unofficially. The State Department, the FBI, my mom knew about him. I did not. And he seemed to, the whole arrangement sort of happened quickly. And all of a sudden, one of the translators came into the compound where I was staying, into the prison house, with a text. And he said, "This is from somebody who's going to come get you. And I want you to respond to this text in a notebook, and then I'll go away and write your answer to the text. Probably go somewhere into the bush, to use a different cell tower." But the text said, "Tell Michael we will bring him back to Dunkerstrasse 8." So basically, my correct address at the time in Berlin. And it's not easy to spell Dunkerstrasse. It has a C that most Americans miss. Didn't think a Somali could have written that. And I thought, oh, well, so that was my first moment of realizing that people were still working on my freedom, that my apartment was still intact, that, people were still thinking about me. And that was profound. And so I scribbled out an answer, and that night, I think they expected money to land, and it didn't. We definitely heard drones overhead. And then the next morning, the guards were so frustrated that they were very tense. They didn't even let me go to the bathroom. I got angry, and I raised my voice, and we switched prison houses.
What month is this? Like June, July, maybe?
June 2014. Okay. And I found out later that a guy who had worked as a SEAL during Black Hawk Down and had good connections to this particular clan, the Saads, had found a way to try to pay off just part of the guard team, or part of the pirate group that was holding me, not the entire coalition of pirates. And that's what made negotiations so hard, was that there were a bunch of pirates in the larger network that wanted to be paid off. Right. There were two large groups, one that was holding me on the boat and one that was responsible for me on land. And I think his idea was to shave off the immediate corner of the gang that was holding me on land for less money. And he landed. He thought everything was straight. They told him they needed twice as much money. And the meeting was in a hotel room, and he almost killed the guy. He almost killed the Somali who was trying to screw him over.
How did this end?
Eventually, a larger ransom was paid through a fund that my mom set up, $1.6 million, that a lot of people had piled into. I'm eternally grateful for everyone who helped.
That's unreal.
And at the end, another negotiator came on the phone. His name was Bob. I didn't know who Bob was, but all of a sudden I was talking to Bob on the phone. And he had successfully freed some Kenyans who were being held by the same pirate gang. I think they were Kenyan medical workers who were captured on land in Somalia by essentially the same bosses. And so he was used to negotiating with them. So he stepped in after they were freed to help my mom. And
is the FBI helping with
this? Yeah, they
too?
knew him.
Okay.
So they brought him in essentially, and Bob, sealed the deal. So,
and what was the actual like D-Day like? That
morning, I was lying on a mattress in a filthy prison house as usual in Galkayo, and around 6 when I first woke up, a pirate came in with a cell phone, and he said, "There's a phone call." I said, "Okay, Michael, it's Bob again. Do you know what's going to happen?" I said, "No." I thought Bob, honestly, I thought Bob worked for the UN. I thought Bob maybe worked for the Pentagon. I thought Bob was trying to find me for a violent rescue, something. I thought it was a flip of a coin whether I was going to die in a violent rescue or get freed, peacefully or whatever. Tried to indicate to Bob where I was in German, thinking there would be a recording and somebody could translate it. I had done that on a previous phone call. This phone call lasted all of 30 seconds. I said, "No, I have no idea what's going to happen." The pirate went, "Proof of life only," and took the phone away. So I was still in the dark. I still had no clue. But that pirate later said, "You're going free today." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, whatever."
You didn't believe
I'd heard
him
that
at
so
all?
many times. There's no way I was going to believe a
they
pirate telling
bluffed
me
a
that.
bunch with that?
All the time.
Oh,
That's
wow.
one reason I had to sort of give up hope, is that they had given me hope a few times by saying, "You're going to go free in 2 weeks, Michael. Michael, just one more month. Don't worry." Yeah. And so the first few cycles, I was stupid enough to believe them, and I got my hopes up, and then dusted, right? I mean, I was in worse emotional shape afterwards. So I had to think of hope and despair as a wheel, right, that I had to detach from. So that's what I had, and I haven't heard anyone else say that they detach themselves from hope like that. But you do hear a lot of hostages saying they no longer believe their captors when they say they're going free, because you hear that a lot. Mm. And so that afternoon, I was like, whatever, don't believe it. But a car showed up that afternoon when I went to the bathroom, and the guard outside the bathroom said, "Michael, Gotti," which means your car is here. Mm. I can hear the Gotti. Who cares? Some Somalis came in with a sack of money, like hundreds bundled. And it probably amounted to $10,000, which was probably the payment for the guard team. I still didn't believe it. I still thought, largest chance is that I've been sold to Al-Shabab or some other pirate gang. All my guards started to shake my hand and say goodbye. I'm like, okay, whatever, you guys, But they had packed up their things, so that was real. They told me to pack my stuff. Okay, I did. And then they said their story changed. First, they said they were going to drive me to the airport. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. That's the first positive thing I've heard. And then I got into the car with two Somalis who did not blindfold me. No armed guards. Normally I was packed into a car by men with Kalashnikovs. These were two guys who may or may not have had a pistol on them. I got to sit in the open back seat and no blindfold. So this is positive. This is not bad. And they said, "We're not going to take you to the airport. We're going to take you just out of the city and we're going to give you to another Somali." I'm like, motherfucker, you just sold me to another gang. I was ready to bite someone's head off. They did that, and they basically put me in another car with a driver, and another guy got out of that car and into so the pirates drove away.
Where's Rolly, by the way?
Oh, Rolly was left. I left him on the ship.
Oh, that's way ago. Okay. Yeah. All right.
So I had no news of Rolly. I had heard a rumor that he and Mark got free, but I didn't believe those rumors either. That's a good question, though, because I got in the car and this guy in the car, he's a driver, he's not armed. He said, "You should probably lean back your seat in case people are looking for you. Just make sure you're not being seen through the window." I'm like, okay, whatever. He said, "I'm going to take you to a hotel and your mother should be here." I'm like, damn it. Will somebody just tell me the fucking truth? My mother is not in Somalia. My mother did not come to Galkayo. What is going on? He said, whatever. He dialed a number on his phone. I said, "Talk to her yourself." That's something. My mom and Bob were on the other end of the line, and they said, "Michael, you're going free." And my mom, who listened to both phone calls, both the one that morning and the one in the car, she said the difference in my voice was like night and day. So that was the first moment that I truly believed I was going to go free.
What is that? What is, like, does your whole body have like that rush happen where you're like, holy shit?
I didn't feel it that way, but for the first time, I got good news, right? And for me, it was a steady lightning during the day. It didn't happen all at once, but that was the first big moment. That was the first important moment. And, there were good indications all along the way. And that was the moment where I knew for sure that I wasn't being sold on. And, but there were still some steps. And so that guy brought me to a hotel, and that's where I changed drivers. I think I had to go upstairs in the hotel and make a phone call. Some mayor of North Galkayo, I think, Galkayo is a divided city, shook my hand.
Thanks for your stay.
And a Somali elder.
Hope you enjoyed.
Thanks.
Leave a 5-star review.
And then I got into another car, and then this guy had better English. So it was getting closer, right? This guy turned out to be, he turned out to work for a hostage working group.
Jesus Christ.
And my mom and Bob told me that I was eventually going to go to the airport, the same airport where I had said goodbye to Ashwin.
They weren't. Was your mom actually? She wasn't in Galkayo.
They were in
You were lying
California.
about that.
They were calling me from Long Beach, California, and which is not where I'm from.
Mom's like, that flight's a little long. I'll see you when you get home.
No, we're staying here. You get to fly. I didn't fly back to California. I flew back to Berlin. But from the hotel, we went to the airport, and my mom and Bob had told me that my pilot's name would be Derek. So the SUV drove right up to a plane. This is an airport I recognized. No other planes except this little Cessna, and a sort of bantam man steps out, takes a picture of me and says, "For your mother." I said, "You must be Derek." And he was a very well-spoken South African, I think he'd spent time in South Africa, but Kenyan, white Kenyan who had spent time in the special air services of the.
All right, so you made sure you could fly
the
plane.
UK.
Okay.
He was a former, he was
Right.
a mercenary, but he was a former soldier. And he told me all this once we were in the plane. He got the plane ready. He maintained some kind of patter just to make me feel better. He gave me a backpack, full of things that some people had put together, I think from a NAVEX, a Navy exchange, which I also recognized. I recognized the tag. Fresh shoes, fresh pants that I could use, some glasses that didn't work, and some Dramamine, which was really important for the flight. And he said, "We'll just get going here in a minute." But he was sweating. He was there alone. He had weapons in the back of the plane. He didn't tell me that. The sun, it was only 1 p.m., but he was worried about the sun going down while we were flying because there were no lights where we were going. And he flew me to Mogadishu. And while we were up in the air, he said, "Yeah, I'm former Special Air Services, SAS." And he said, "You have to use the training." And by that, he meant that he was, I know in the meantime.
But he's flying you to Mogadishu. He told you that, right?
Yes.
That's where we're going?
Yes.
So you didn't feel totally free yet because you're like, I'm still in
Right.
the hot zone here.
Well, right. One flight and I'm still in Somalia. But he said, "We're going to land in a part of the airport that's secure for foreigners." I knew that there was a place like that in Mogadishu. He said, "You won't have anything to worry about." But he was telling me in so many words that he was that he was a mercenary, that he was a military guy. And he said, "I know a couple of your friends." I said, "Derek, I don't know you. What are you talking about?" He said, "The fishermen, Rolly and Mark. I flew them out a couple years ago."
Oh my God.
So they spent about a year in captivity, and it was Derek's job to fly them out.
Oh, that's got to be
And that
such
was
a full
wonderful.
circle
That was
moment.
great. The first time that I knew that they were alive, for sure.
Wow.
So that was very moving.
Was that a moment where you had, again, you're not going to feel it until you're on the ground in Berlin and kissing it and knowing we're out of here, but when you hear that and you're in the air with them, you're going to a place in the airport that's probably going to be secure. Is it setting in?
Yes.
That,
Then I really started to relax. I took some Dramamine because I didn't want to get motion sick.
Right.
And then after whatever it was, 2.5 hours, 3 hours, we landed. And 20 minutes later, so there were some bearded men on the runway sort of guided the plane, and a couple of them took me out of the plane and put me into an SUV.
Oh, you're like,
And
here we go.
right, Derek, watching it, said, "That's going to give him nightmares." No, I knew it was all cool. They were one was an FBI agent, and one was probably a SEAL.
Okay. Okay. So they're American guys. Got it.
They were Americans, and they, they questioned me, "How are you doing?" I said I was sick, had a skin infection,
How are you doing? Been in captivity for 3 years, pal.
I'm better than I was 2 hours ago, but
Jesus Christ.
I still feel rotten. I had a lot of beard growth. I was filthy. I really was coughing for some reason. And I had, it turns out I had a staph infection just because of the filth in my skin. But they took my vital signs and they said, well, C-130 is going to land and you're going to go to Nairobi. And sure enough, after only 20 minutes, one of those big military transport planes landed on the same runway. They had been following us. I mean, no question. They had been. And Derek had told me the story about being in the Special Air Services and parachuting, I think, in Yemen in the 70s, and landing on a rock with his kneecap, breaking his kneecap.
Ugh.
Like, that's a hazard, right? And so when we took off again on the C-130 and I noticed the crew was wearing these jumpsuits with padded knees, I was like, are you guys ready to jump out of this plane for me? I'm like, no.
Just in case.
No. No. I mean, nobody would tell me anything, but I think that's what was happening. I think it was probably circling Galkayo while Derek landed and made sure that they tagged me on the way out.
And then from Nairobi, did you go straight to Berlin?
Sort of. That was a long flight. We had to go to Djibouti first and take some more people on the C-130, and then landed in Nairobi. And then they had to make sure some Germans had to be there so that I could have a German passport. For some reason, I had left my American passport behind in Nairobi, but they had that too. I mean, the paperwork went surprisingly well, and I was admitted into Nairobi. And I stayed there for about 3 days in the home of a German officer, basically an FBI agent, but for Germany.
Did you feel comfortable and free?
Bundeskriminalamt, and that's when I started to feel really good.
That's awesome.
Everyone sort of stood around me in a circle in his kitchen, and he said, "What would you like?" I said, "Do you have a beer?" And he had a fridge full of German beer. He said,
the good stuff.
Men, when they come out of captivity, that's what they ask for.
Yeah.
I said, I didn't have the presence of mind to ask what women ask for, but he said men were predictable.
That had to be the best beer you ever had.
I have a feeling
that
women have, it's not as easy to predict, but men, if you have a beer for somebody for a man who's been a hostage, you're not going to go wrong. So that dude saw me coming from a mile away.
And then you were telling me you started writing this book within weeks of this.
Well, yes,
being
a
over.
draft. So what notes were a constant source of drama, right? I like I said, I had my notes confiscated at least twice, and they were confiscating them. I was made to realize because I was taking notes about them, right? I was trying to keep a journal. I was writing down conversations with the guards, and I was naming the guards, and I was naming locations where I was held, and they didn't want that. So when I started to write again in the journals, I was mostly writing fiction, but I learned to write down important conversations. First of all, in German, not use names, not use place names, and use a really small hand. So they went through I had wound up with 6 notebooks full of writing. They went through those notebooks, and they were looking for their own names and that kind of thing. And finally, they're like, "You can take this." When I got home, I was like, okay, now I have to write a book about this, but I have this, this ridiculous, small corners of certain pages that are actual notes that I took from Somalia. What am I going to do? So I sat down to write the journal that I had not written. I sat down to write as much as I remembered from
all fresh.
And I thought, if I'm lucky, I'll have enough remembered, and I had more than enough remembered. That's the condensed version of what I remember.
Yeah, this is 460 some pages.
Right, and I didn't put anything in the book that I wasn't absolutely sure about.
Wow.
Right. If my memory petered out, then I left that part out.
Now you had at the 800 day-ish mark, you had that moment where you hear the homily from the Pope and you forgive these guys. Now, let's fast forward a few months after you're out. You're, I guess, somewhat back used to freedom and making some of your own decisions during the day and being in a place where you're not a fucking prisoner. But was there residual anger, PTSD, or those types of things?
Yeah, I was in bad shape when I got out. I was easily overwhelmed, but just by my friends and family.
Sure.
I had not and nobody ever mentions this when they talk about coming out of captivity. I was held basically in solitary confinement. So the only people I had to socialize with for the last couple of years were pirates.
Yeah.
I got along with a couple of them, had great conversations with one guy named Boschko, who's named in that book a lot. But he was still a pirate. I mean, when it came down to it, he would pick up his gun and threaten me, right? If something went south. So we knew our roles, and I kept my conversation to a minimum. If I had to pee, I said piss in Somali. If I wanted to eat, I said chum chum, which was slang from the ship for food. There was never any vagary when I tried to talk to them. And it turns out that interpreting that and being able to understand that in your own language, at least in my case, is a level of the brain. It's an aspect of the mind that can atrophy just like your muscles. And so when I was in a room full of people who I loved and who loved me, speaking either German or English, I had so much to process that I wasn't good at it anymore. So I didn't have a party until 2 weeks after I got back. I could, 6 people I could handle, maybe. 3 people was better. And I was just easily overwhelmed, and I was in terrible shape physically. I couldn't run. I didn't even know I couldn't run. So I'm glad I didn't try late, in Somalia. But, yoga doesn't build up your muscles.
No, not alone.
Or, some, but not enough of them. And I tried to run for a tram in Berlin, and I just couldn't. I had no stride. I think I did one normal day in Berlin, which involves a lot of walking, and I felt like I'd played a soccer game. My knees hurt like hell, and it turned out most likely to be ligaments around the knee that were just protein deprived. So I saw a specialist, and what I realized is that everything, or so it seemed from some of the research I did, everything that was wrong with me had something to do with either proteins or amino acids. And to build up muscle mass, you have to take protein. You can't eat that much protein. You can't eat enough protein in a day if you really want to put on muscle, and I had to put on muscle. So one doctor said, don't follow a vegetarian diet. And when I actually looked into it, I started to buy protein powders.
Yeah.
But yoga, exercise, being careful about what I was eating. I mean, eating really properly and thinking about protein put me in a pretty good position within a month. I started to feel better physically really fast. And like I said, I went home to California within a couple of months, and I went surfing.
Wow.
I would say
like?
I was not. It was great to be in the water. I remember I had to get out in the middle of the session to breathe, because I was so easily winded. I was not back to full physical strength until a year later. And mentally, who knows? I just didn't take anything for granted. I think I'm fine now, but I for a long time, I wasn't sure. So,
what about the reunion with your mom?
Oh, that was, so the one question they asked me when I was at the airport in Mogadishu, the FBI agent in the SEAL, they said, well, so your mom wants to know, do you want to come to California or do you want to go to Berlin? Like, what? I'm going to Berlin. I'm going to, that question was crucial because if I was going to Berlin, they were going to fly her out. So she flew to Berlin and I saw her in her hotel room, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was great.
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
Seeing someone you love after so long.
Her brother and sister came over too, and so we started to have breakfasts, every morning breakfast.
That's cool.
It was nice.
How did you deal, or as the weeks and months set in, do you still have flashbacks and nightmares to this stuff? Did you have PTSD from it, or?
PTSD is hard to define. I had nightmares in the first year. I definitely had PTSD symptoms. And in fact, one of the people who was with me flying back, in fact, he got on the plane before we landed in Nairobi, was a psychologist. And he was great. but he's an FBI psychologist who sees every American captive, or did at that time. And before he really introduced himself to me, he was talking in my ear about what I might be going through. I'm like, who is this guy? He's a very well-built black guy, and he was former special forces of some kind, I think. But what his expertise was PTSD. It was I mean, ordinarily for soldiers, right? But he took an interesting approach. I think in the airport in Nairobi, going back to Berlin, I noticed that whenever strangers came close to us, there was a group of us, maybe 4 people, 2 Germans, 2 Americans, and me, 5. We were all getting on the same commercial flight. And when people came close to us, total strangers, I noticed that I started to freak out. So I turned to Carl, Dr. Carl, and said, "Am I hypervigilant?" He said, "Maybe." And then we stopped over in Abu Dhabi and, met up again and talked. And I said, "Are you here because I might have PTSD?" He said, "We don't like to put a label on anything." And he was extremely helpful because he knew exactly what I was going through. Yeah. And he was not, I think that approach, that idea of not putting a label on something when everyone knew that I was screwed up, was the right approach. So in other words, PTSD has such a reputation, and it has so many connotations in English or in the West, that for someone to sit there after an experience like that and think on top of it, "Oh my God, I might have PTSD," is an extra layer of something to recover from. And Carl was important because he guided me in a way that avoided that. Writing about it was very helpful, and more or less the same as talk therapy. I did see a talk therapist for a little while, but there was a moment a few months afterwards where I talked to Carl. I said, I haven't seen a therapist. Do I need to? He said, "You don't need to, no. If you want to, yeah. But also you can call me if there's anything." The most important thing for me in terms of recovery was physical. And what I tell people now, because nobody tells you this either, is to do something that thrills you. So surfing has become extremely important in the meantime. I still remember the first time I got on a bike in Berlin, because your body and your mind stop remembering what it means to be joyful, what it means to feel that kind of thrill.
It's like being a kid again when you do that.
Exactly. And that's really important for recovery. All kinds of other things are also important for recovery, and a lot of them are independent. They're individual. But those for me were the most important things. And nothing happens overnight. It simply doesn't. So surfing, I've actually written a big essay about what's called surf therapy in the Surfer's Journal this year. Because also, I mean, my dad died when I was 12. My dad committed suicide. Oh. So I had been through this before, in a sense, and I know that surfing will help. I know what that does. And the reason it helps is not just that it's fun. It's a sport. Of course, lots of sports can help. But surfing is unique in the sense that whenever you're on a wave, you have to be totally present. So there's a meditative aspect as well as the physical thrill. And all that, apart from just being in the ocean, is really helpful to someone who likes to be in the ocean. To someone who doesn't like being in the ocean, you got to find something else.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, but there's plenty of things. I see exactly what you're saying. Did you mentioned the times where you considered committing suicide while you were in captivity and the opportunities, and obviously you never did. I'm glad you never did.
Me too.
Did the thought of your dad come into your mind?
Oh, yeah.
Stop you from doing that?
It actually did stop me, because I thought that was enough for my mother to endure.
Right.
She didn't need 2 people to do that. Yes, and it's interesting that I didn't know he had committed suicide for a long time, and so I had
Oh, wow.
sort of moved my life in a way that was, I thought he had a heart attack, so I tried to be heart healthy.
Wait, they didn't tell you?
I know.
When did you find out?
In 2010.
Wait, you didn't find out till you were a full-blown, long-time adult that your father had...
Yeah.
Whoa, what's that like?
That was rough. I write about it in The Desert and the Sea. That was an important moment.
Was it your mom that told you that?
No, I ordered his death certificate. Yeah.
Now, what's that conversation like with your mom afterwards?
Yeah. She said yes, as if she'd been meaning to tell me.
It's a tough spot.
Yeah.
It's a tough spot for both of you.
Yeah.
Because you're young, you're 12.
I was 12, yeah.
It's like, I could see that going both ways with whether you tell or not.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's your father. You'd want to know, but...
I don't blame her for stalling a little bit, but that's a long time not to say anything.
Yeah.
Before I found out, I was reading reading a novel by David Van. What is it called? Anatomy of a Suicide. Chronicle. Can we look that up? David Van, a novel about suicide. Very good, but he knew at about the same age, and he grew up as a teenager in the shadow of this idea that his father had killed himself. I was reading it, going, fuck, I'm glad that didn't happen to me. I mean, I'm glad I didn't grow up with that shadow. And then only later did I learn what had actually happened. I'm like, oh, I didn't grow up with that shadow simply because I wasn't told.
You didn't know. Did you forgive your mom?
Legend of a Suicide, excuse me. Yeah, it's a very good novel.
Did you forgive your mom for not telling you?
At that point, what are you going to do? Yeah. That's not...
It wasn't from a bad place or anything, clearly.
It's right. It's not a question of anger at that point.
Yeah, why'd you order his death certificate?
There were hints.
There were hints.
Yeah, I knew there was something odd. A couple of things didn't add up, and then the internet was new, or the idea that I could order something like that on the internet was new. And I'm like, here's this service that can order me the certificate, and I don't have to go, present myself to any American bureaucracy. I can have it sent to me, $50. I can do that. You had to prove who you were and everything like that, but that was the first time that kind of thing was available just remotely.
Did your mom
over the internet, and so it seemed easy.
Did your mom know why? Did she ever know why you did it?
We both know why. I mean, he was an alcoholic. There was all kinds of drama in the family, so he was a recovering alcoholic at that point.
Well, looking back on all this, the way you tell the story is amazing, and it's hard to do too, because every time you tell it, you gotta relive it. So I appreciate you doing that very much. And obviously, we're gonna have the book link below. Everyone, if you've enjoyed this, you'll definitely enjoy the book. But looking back on it now, obviously, no one ever wants to be taken hostage and have almost 3 years of their life taken. But seeing as you've also, like you said, gotten involved with a lot of organizations to help people who have been through similar events.
I'm on the board for Hostage US, which is a great organization that helps the families of people who are captive. It doesn't help with their cases. It doesn't help get people out, but it helps support the families because a lot of what they go through is predictable.
So seeing as you've been able to pay that forward in a way, and also now clearly have such an appreciation for so many great things in your life and the fun things you do, whether it be surfing or just hanging out with family and friends. I don't really know how to ask this, but do you, forgive me if this isn't the right way to ask it, but after the fact, are you appreciative of having had to go through something like that?
I mean, what can you say about that? No, I wish it hadn't happened.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't, you can't go back and redo it.
Yes.
So there probably was a process of accepting that it was part of my life, but honestly, it didn't take that long. I wasn't in denial about that. Right. Writing about it really helped. I did start another book, which is on ice right now, but about recovery and about what trauma and recovery mean, or how they're talked about in other cultures. Because I was on a ship with guys from completely different cultures from me.
Ooh, I think people need this book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Convince the New York publishing industry of that.
Okay.
I went to Cambodia, and I met three of the guys I was held with on the ship who were from Cambodia. I got this scarf from
Cool.
one of the families. That was wonderful to see them again. But I think it was obvious that those three guys hadn't been able to sit down and write about what they'd been through. You know, they were still sitting on, and when they got out, so the guys from the Naham 3 got out after I did. They were still held on land for another 2 years in just dire circumstances, close to starvation for another 2 years. When they got out in 2016, I had dealt with the negotiators, tried to help them with a little bit of insight. And so the negotiators flew me down to Nairobi to see them come out. They landed in Nairobi from Galkayo, came out, you know, with lots of media on them, lots of people around them that they didn't know, lots of officials, embassy people, and cameras. This group of kids, and I was there. They didn't even see me. They weren't expecting to see me, so I tapped one of them on the shoulder. He was one of the Cambodians. His nickname for me was Number One. He goes, his face lights up. He goes, "Number One!" Everybody notices. They all erupt, and everyone starts to jump and yell. And that's on video. Wow. I think an AP cameraman got that, along with a couple of others.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was a beautiful moment.
Yes.
But I noticed that all of those guys were in the same physical and mental place that I was when I got out, which is you're sitting on a mountain of anger. You're resentful. You're half-starved. You don't know what the next few days or years is going to be like. And at the same time, you've had to hold in all that anger, and you haven't been able to lash out at anybody. Those guys, when I saw them, they got out in 2016, and I traveled only to Cambodia when we thought COVID was lifting at the end of 2021. There was a window where you could do that. Vietnam was not yet open, so otherwise I would have gone to Vietnam. Philippines, I think, was impossible. But anyway, I made a quick trip to Cambodia and wrote about it for The New Yorker. Those guys still needed help. They were having every one of them had a kid. They were all having marital trouble. They were all still trying to, make it work financially, because they had gone out to be. They had actually been labor trafficked, and that's part of what I wrote about.
Oh, shit.
They had gone out because they were poor. They're working people in Cambodia, and they were trying to do it without being fishermen at this point. And I think you could notice the fact that they had not sat down to just remember everything consciously in some way. There's very little therapy culture in Cambodia. I wanted to find out what it was in their own language, right? Because the Khmer Rouge is a very recent nightmare. Lots of people died during the Cambodian Civil War in the 70s. So they do have a language for inward hurt. And the most eloquent term that I learned was bakspat, which means broken courage. And that's the kind of poetry I wanted to hear from various different cultures. But I'm not sure that they had a new way of getting over it. I think they have old ways, which are music and sort of I was there during a water festival, and it seemed to me that it's based on the river, the Mekong, that goes through Cambodia. That these rituals that happen every year are also about getting over old traumas and old resentments. There was a lot of stuff just built into the river festival that was about letting go of things like that. But you have to do that consciously.
Yes.
And I think they were really happy to have someone to talk about Somalia for a week. I would have dinner every night in one of their houses. And afterwards we would drink beer and talk about Somalia. And they can't do that with their wives.
No.
It's like talking about Mars.
Right.
So that was extremely interesting. And I would like to visit, maybe not everyone, but as many people as I could get to and write about the differences.
Oh, yeah, that's a book. Oof.
I would think so. I think I was not able to predict the nature of the book without actually going on the trip. But I need someone to pay me to go.
I think we should.
I need a publisher to give me the advance. So I'm finishing my novel at the moment, but that was that book is on a back burner.
Okay, we got to figure that out. That sounds so interesting. Well, Michael, we've been talking for damn near 3.5 hours. That did not feel like 3.5 hours.
No, it didn't. Is it really?
This was riveting, man. Okay. I mean, your story obviously is. I'm sorry it happened to you. It's a unbelievable story in every way. I'm glad it ended up being that you got free.
Me too. Thank you. Like I said, for a while it was a coin flip.
Well, we're going to have the book link below. You guys can check it out down there. Also, you're going to have the novel coming out about the American drone program.
Yes.
That you were working on.
A fictional drone program. It's slightly speculative, but it's becoming less and less speculative every day.
That's right. Art imitating life, if you will.
It's not going to be science fiction anymore.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today. This was really incredible.
Thank you, Julian.
All right. Everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace. That is why I podcast right there, man. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.